Looks like we got 0 viewers. Anyways, hey, what's up, everybody? This is Noel OG del Rancho. Glad to be back with you guys. I've been gone because I got a little bit under the weather, man. It looks like I caught the
Chinese AIDS.
El SIDA Chino, as Tercio called it. Yeah. And we have with us today, we have Guillermo, Escobar, Vasquéz. We have Paul, Von Leto, and Tercio from mundorepubliqueto. Welcome, guys.
Paul is also from mundorepubliqueto, I should add.
Hola. Yeah.
Thank you.
I try to add both of you guys from mundorepubliqueto. I didn't. If the grammar didn't come out correctly, my apologies.
No problem.
It's okay. Who knows what the virus did to your brain? It's okay.
I'm still recuperating, bro. I'll be honest. Like, I don't have the same lung capacity that I had obviously before.
Oh my God.
So slowly but surely, I'm getting my breath again.
Yeah,
Okay.
I was dating a girl that she got the coup too, and she was fucked up because of it.
Yeah, no, man. The first couple of days after, like, I would consider myself recovered, I got tired walking around my house or like walking up and down the street. Like, it winded me, you know. Now I can kind of do most things, but just even like talking for a while, it will wind me. So I gotta up.
You have to pace yourself, basically.
You have to basically smoke as much as you can, and this will train your lungs to basically, get more powerful. I think that's how it works.
Yeah.
A smoke crack.
I think I gotta smoke cigars, man. My India great grandmother smoked cigars every morning, and she lived to be 105. So I think there's something.
The true mestizos smokes crack. Yeah, that's the true illumination.
They smoke Pookie here in California. Yeah, they're smoking that. That's not good. But anyways, I'm glad to be back. I guess today we're going to be doing an episode responding to Eric Stryker, who, to be honest with you guys, I'm not the most familiar with. I've only become familiar with him recently. But maybe Guillermo, if you want to, or even you, yeah, of course. Why don't you guys
going to say, these two are going to even know him better than me.
Yeah, why don't you guys introduce who Eric Stryker is to the audience in case they don't know who he is, and then
yeah, sure. I mean, we gotta clarify that, like, we know Eric Stryker. We don't. I mean, I have interacted with him, like, personally on, like, Facebook and that kind of stuff, but he actually came in. So he's now part of TRS, I think, and I think the clip that we're about to dissect is from Borzoi's show. Am I correct?
Because I remember
it's technically his show, but Borzoi was not the guy co-hosting for this specific episode.
Okay, I just remember Borzoi. Borzoi's a friend.
Yeah.
Anyway, like, Stryker came in a little bit by the time we were leaving TRS.
Leaving.
I mean, it doesn't matter. Like, leaving TRS. I mean, like when we were on our way out, and so, like, we actually don't have like a deep working relation with him, or know him as well as as we could say Mike Enoch, which whom I even met personally one time. But still, like, he's part of, like, the TRS circle, and we were related to TRS. So I guess he's kind of like the how do I put this? The Nazbol guy. I don't know if he's a Nazbol. I'm not trying to slander him or anything like that in case he's not, but he's like kind of like the guy that's like nationalist, but like deep on the socialist part. Of course, the racial part is, he values the racial part quite a lot, but he seems to, let's say, like, at least try to know things about different cultures, different people. He doesn't always get it right, like he did in the audio here. But he's kind of like the guy that's like, if there was like an international socialist, nationalist socialist, international thing.
He comes from that milieu.
He would be the guy. Yeah.
I think he actually has said that he, before coming into TRS, was basically a Marxist.
And now he's become an avid Tucker Carlson like shill, which is like one of the weirdest regressions I've ever seen in my life. But
well, I've completely lost track. Like I like this is the first Stryker thing I've heard in years, since maybe 2018, 2017, something like that.
The contrast is stark. It's been quite a change to see throughout the years. I'll put it that way.
Yeah, me too. I haven't kept up with TRS since 2018 too. We're on the same page, Tercio and me.
Did you guys touch on, I had to step away for a sec, but did you guys touch on him being Uruguayan?
We did not, no. We can actually talk about that a little bit. So this is kind of like what gets me a bit upset about him is the fact that now for a long time, he just kind of tried to hide this for many years, that he was Uruguayan, and eventually came out, mostly due to his own stupidity, but I'm not going to delve into that. But essentially, it was discovered that he was Uruguayan. And what occurred as a result afterwards is he started regularly on these podcasts that were watched by a lot of people and listened to by a lot of people, that he would just act like he would be the prime authority on like how racial relations like operates in Latin America. And it was just always extremely, extremely far off from like the actual reality of the situation. So what do I mean by this? Like, for example, a regular theme you would see in many Strike and Mike episodes would be this idea, for example, that the small hat people are targeting Argentina for white genocide. Like, this is a legit thing that he's pushed many times in the past, that he still pushes on his Telegram to this day. And it's like extremely perplexing. He pushes the idea that like white genocide is occurring in Argentina and Uruguay.
Oh my God.
Well, I think it's important to understand that he seems to be Uruguayan, or at least of Uruguayan background. He seems to have been pretty Americanized at this point. He doesn't really seem to be in touch with Uruguayan culture. I don't know the guy.
He grew up in Brooklyn, if that makes sense.
Yeah, so that's New York's a tough place to grow up in, especially if you're kind of like these people on the edges. Like if you're kind of a southern coner of Italian extraction, like are you gonna kick it with the blackwash Puerto Ricans
or the Dominicans, or
or do you kick it with the whitewashed Italians who, it's kind of a weird place to be, I would assume, growing up in New York City. It would be tough.
It produces radical Latinos and Eric Strikers. That's how I would say it.
Yeah. I would think that. So, I empathize with. The thing is, for all the listeners out there, is that he kind of answered on a Q&A. I think, Paul, why don't you tell us a little bit about exactly what happened?
Yeah, he got a question, I think, from Schizo. I think he was his name. And he was basically, if I remember...
Can I let you... Zero Schizo, who's technically a friend of this show.
Yeah. He was...
So Zero asked the question?
Yeah, yes, he sent in a super chat, actually, 2 super chats, and Eric Stryker completely freaked out on the second one completely.
I didn't know Zero was involved. I wish I would have told him. Okay, go ahead.
Yeah, so he basically, as I remember, he was basically asking him about what he thought about the Hispanismo movement here in the southern part of the continent, and what were his thoughts about it. So he was trying to, I think it came up before something like that, before the question that Schizo made, something about South America and the way the racial relationships from the coordinates of white nationalists. And basically the question, I don't remember exactly what Schizo asked the Eric Stryker.
We have the audio. We have the audio, so we don't have to misrepresent him. We're going to be playing it for the audience, and they're going to hear it.
Yeah. So basically, so Zero called into the show and asked Stryker what he thought about Hispanismo, Hispanism. And first, as Guillermo said, like we're gonna go into the audio. But first, Stryker like completely misunderstands what Zero was asking, and then Zero he both clarifies and doubles down. Basically, he does both things at once, and then Stryker gives out a completely wrong diagnosis of the situation, and that's what we're here to clarify. At least I like my intention was like more to clarify what he was saying, not so much to shit on Stryker, but you know, it seems like we're also gonna shit on the guy, so that's fine.
Well, you know, to be honest, I feel like, again, I'm not the most familiar with these circles, man. I understand that there was a whole world before I got on Twitter, and then some ended up on YouTube. My impression is that he doesn't have, first off, he doesn't have any knowledge of the actual intellectual, philosophical, political tradition of Hispanoamerica, you know, that goes back centuries. But well beyond, you know, he seems to think that this concept of Hispano identity comes from like Che Guevara or something.
Well, not only that, but he claims to be an expert mostly on like things like Nazi Germany. I can tell you as an actual historian myself, like he's very like not well knowledge on that part of history as well. Like he pushes a lot of times this idea that like during World War II, Hitler was trying to liberate the Slavs from communism, when in reality, like we have all of this evidence that shows otherwise, that the Germans were committing atrocities like crazy against the Slavic people during this time period.
Yeah, he hated the Slav. But anyways, the point that I was trying to make though was that he doesn't have any knowledge, and he definitely doesn't have any respect to acquire the knowledge. That's kind of what compelled me to want to do a response to him, because it felt to me like there's no respect and appreciation for a tradition that he doesn't know anything about. There's no humility to saying, oh, wow, there's an entire other political tradition worldview that I had no idea existed. He just tries to condescend and write it off.
Well, it's worse than that, dude. He will brag about claiming he's been all over to every inch of South America and in Central America, and that he knows what's going on and how it operates. That's what I don't like about this.
He says that? I didn't know about it, because I was under the impression that this question was off the cuff, and he's
been doing this for years. This is why I highly dislike this.
Oh, okay. So that's puts it in another light.
Yeah, I mean, we're gonna get into the audio, but the things he said, like when I heard them, I wasn't even mad. Like I was like, oh, this is typical gringo, like both projection and like completely misunderstanding. Like once you understand the civilizational divide between the Anglo-American world and the Spanish-American world, like when you hear the things that Stryker said in the audios that we're gonna play, it just goes like, oh yeah, this is a typical like. You know, it's like if he was like an anti-racist liberal or whatever, he would say like the cliches we all know about them here. But he's like on the opposite side, so he's framing it from the white racialist perspective, right?
Well, what's funny is the white racialist perspective on these topics becomes almost identical to what the Latinxers say on this exact same topic as well. A lot of people don't get that.
Yeah. All right, so okay. should we just
let's
go
just
ahead
jump
and play
in.
the audio?
Let's jump in. Let's hit that, Rancho.
Let's let me know if you guys can hear this. Okay.
Tom is an OG, so thanks.
Can you hear that?
Yes, we can hear that.
Yeah.
Okay, cool. And it's not too fuzzy or anything. I just want to make sure the levels are right.
No, it sounds okay.
Okay,
no,
cool.
But then again, our ears aren't screwed up because of the Chinese 8. So.
For sticking around. So is there anything else, Borzoi?
Yeah, Zero Schizo just did 2 separate donations. First donation for $5 on the topic of Hispanism. This is not a racial movement. It's never been, will never be. In order to understand it, you'd have to get out, which is literally impossible for Americans.
Well, what is a Hispanic? A Hispanic, and this is something I've said on Telegram, Hispanic is a person who is a combination of Celtic and Iberian and is from Spain. That's it's like saying.
What did he say?
Wrong. Zero corrects him. Zero corrects him later, but yeah, no, like no, that's a Spaniard, and this idea that like like a Spaniard is a Celtic with Iberian. It's like, what about Rome, homie?
Yeah.
What about the Romans, bro?
What about the Visigoths, dude?
What about the Visigoths?
What about the Moors?
For better or worse? What about the Moors? Yeah. What about the Moors?
The Sephardics, brother? You might not want to admit that part.
Not a drop of more blood.
No, I mean we know that the claims about like Spaniards being Moors is obviously that's also part of the Black legend. It's deep exaggeration. But like this idea, like to bring it down to like the most what's the word? I don't want to say savage, but the most what am I trying to say?
Essentialist, racial essentialist.
Yeah, you might as well say like, well, a Hispaniard is a Homo sapiens, somebody that it's something completely like that, maybe partially right, but it's completely useless. Like Celtic and Iberian, like, dude, I don't even know. I have no connection to anything Celtic. Like everything I know about Celtic anything is because it's like the Irish and like I don't know, like the Legend of Zelda or something.
You mean you don't wear tartan skirts and play the bagpipes?
No. Well, I mean,
you're not a real Hispanic then.
Yep, Celtic and Iberian. Okay. So this is the problem. Like, this is like, this is the word. This is the word I want to say. Indigenous, like the most indigenous thing. It's like, I'm gonna go for like the most stereotypically indigenous native thing that I can think of, and then disregard everything completely. Yes, disregard everything else. It's the same thing that the indigenous do here in America. Well, right. in South America, where they go like, no, it doesn't matter that the Inca Empire lasted 3 times less. The Spanish Empire lasted like 3 times as long as the Inca Empire. It's like, no, we're Incas. It's just like, no, dude, like, no. Peruvians are not Incas. Spaniards are not Celtic and Iberian, and even less so Hispanics.
I was going to say, I have these show notes here. I'm going to read this on the topic of what is a Hispanic real quick. It says here, interestingly, both of the terms above which I'm referring to, Spaniard and Hispanic, are Anglo inventions and not present in the Spanish language. And I put in parentheses, not with the meaning ascribed to their English versions, at least. We'll begin with the term Spaniard. The closest Spanish language equivalent to this word is Español. The Real Academia provides the following definition, quote, adjective, natural of Spain, the European country, end quote. Spain is a multi-ethnic kingdom located in the Iberian Peninsula. The name itself is the Latin geographic term used to describe said peninsula, with Iberia being its Greek synonym. Spaniard, as an ethnic identification, is meaningless. One cannot be an ethnic Spaniard any more than he can be an ethnic Balkan, American, or Asian. Anything you guys want to add on to that?
Yeah, so just to kind of sum it up, I think one of the things that's probably good to address is to understand the difference between Hispanic or Hispano and Espanol and Spaniard, right? These things are kind of operate at a different level. Spaniards, of course, are Hispanic, but there is a subtle difference. Being Hispanic doesn't make you a Spaniard. Spaniard means you come from the modern country of Spain, which I don't claim. I don't really know anyone who seriously claims to be a Spaniard. Except I think for Andy, I think he thinks he is a Spaniard.
Well, just look at him. I mean, what's more Spanish than that?
But anyways, please continue.
I am. I claim to be Spanish, at least by
Well, that's another one.
Spanish by my father, right?
Right. And that's another one, because in the U.S., especially in the East Coast, they'll call Hispanics Spanish. Right. So like if you're Puerto Rican or Dominican, regardless of your complexion, they're going to say, oh, the Spanish boy, right? The Spanish person. So that kind of, it's another layer. But you're saying, your dad's actually from Spain, correct?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Exactly. So that's a lot different dynamic going on there.
Right.
Let me keep reading here. On to Hispano. It says, interestingly, the Real Academia provides the four following definitions. 1, a natural of Hispania. 2, belonging or related to Hispania. 3, Español. 4, belonging or related to Hispano-America. So we can clearly see that the two terms are to a certain extent synonyms of one another. They are the same word after all, although the term Hispano appears to have a closer association with Spanish America, although it can still be used to refer to the peninsula. It remains a geographical term used to describe a large number of ethnicities that occupy what was the Spanish Main, while evoking the political and historical connective tissue that binds a lot of these ethnicities together.
Right. So, it's interesting. This is taken from the Royal Academy of the Spanish Language in Spain, and they're defining for you what a Spaniard is and what an Hispano is. And obviously in the definition here, belonging or related to Hispanoamerica is one of the definitions that the dictionary puts forth. And I think, to be honest, in the wider world, when you say Hispanic or Hispano, I think, and maybe I have a bias, but I think most people think of Spanish America. They think of Latin America. They don't necessarily, obviously you can't think of that without thinking about Spain, but I don't think people think of the Spaniards who talk with a lisp. I think they think of from Mexico to Argentina,
Yeah, I agree. I would agree with you. And so, like, for instance, we don't make the distinction. Like for us, Hispano is, people from Spain are Hispano, as the Real Academia said. Right. But I think this reveals, now that you mentioned, this reveals an interesting dynamic, because Stryker basically flipped the definition, because he said, like, no, like, we're saying that, well, while Hispano for us, and inside the Hispanic sphere, we ourselves can use Hispanic to both mean somebody, from Hispanoamerica or from Europa, Spain. I like what you say is, I think is correct, OG, that for the wider world, like, Hispanic would be most closely associated with Hispanic America, precisely because our relation with the United States and the ethnic Hispanic label there, right? Like, they would consider like a Spanish person like Spanish, and then Hispanic is a very specific thing. So he flipped it because precisely it seems like I'm reading this commentary, like Stryker's more hostile towards Hispanics, because he that comment that was there. Yeah, it's like he has to overcompensate. It's like, what's a Hispanic? No, just 100% Iberian phenotype. You understand what I mean? It's like an overcompensation. Yeah, he can't just say like, well, a Hispanic is somebody that's part of the wider sphere of influence of the Spanish Empire, and therefore, anybody that speaks Spanish and is part of the Hispanic culture, right? Like, so Spanish would be his native tongue, would be a Hispanic. No, he has to go like, no, like 100% Iberian, like Celtic, like, bro, Celtic, like 100% Celtic with.
Yeah. If you wanted to make some important distinctions, you could use the term Ibero-American, but I don't think that is even in the parlance of these people.
Yeah, exactly. Ibero-America, that's another thing. Yeah, Iberian, like for them.
If you wanted to contain the definition between what they will call South American or Latin America.
Mm-hmm.
Absolutely. Right. Let's continue the clip, because we're gonna have a lot to delve into.
Yeah.
The Anglo-Saxon movement, a person who is a combination of Celtic and Iberian, and is from Spain. That's Hispanic. It's like saying the Anglo-Saxon movement. There are many blacks and American Indians and people of all types of races who are. You could make using the Hispanicists or whatever argument. You could say the same about them, that they're Anglo-Saxons. It doesn't even make any sense. And I find that.
Wait, hold on.
Yeah.
There's another correction here. You could say that if the British and later whatever white America, quote unquote, had assimilated culturally, racially, had shared its technology, did everything with the blacks and the natives that he's talking about. That is only recently started to happen, and managed the wrong way. And so, and to him, I tell you, like, yes, like there are Anglo blacks and they're different from Hispanic blacks. There are Anglo natives, Anglo Native Americans, says, that doesn't make a lot of sense, but Anglo Indians. And they are also different from Spanish, Hispanic Indians. So yes, the difference is that the Anglo-Saxons did not have the wish, the desire to create this sphere of influence. This is why we talk about like a predator empire and a generator empire. England and later the United States in its own territories was a predatory empire. It excluded, it killed, it displaced the people that were not, that weren't white, basically. Spanish, yes, the Spanish did not do this. So that's why we can more easily talk about black Hispanos and white Hispanos, and because that sphere of being similar beyond just your genes, right? Like not just your genes, or even to the exclusion of your genes. Why it makes sense to talk about Hispanismo and not Anglo-Saxonism.
Well, this might be controversial, but I would actually say this. I think a black American would have an easier time assimilating to the United Kingdom than he would in Ghana, where his ancestors probably are from, and there's a reason for that.
Probably, yeah.
Well, that's a key takeaway, that the Anglos didn't fuse with these people, right?
But
with the people that
they still definitely affected them, though. I mean, you can't just be ruled by Anglos for centuries and not be affected.
For sure.
But the point I want to emphasize that for 500 years now, the Spanish root has been fusing with the Indian root and the African root in whatever regions where that exists.
I think we're coming to the crux of the problem with the white nationalists in the United States, because for them, what is Hispanic America, it's a real problem in their narrative, because for them the original sin of the Spaniards was actually mixing with the local population. So for them, Spain and the Spanish Empire was always tainted from the beginning, taking into account the coordinates that they have about racial purity and maintaining the race and blah, 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 blah. So these the things that we are trying to put forward into the war in our way of thinking clashes directly with their racial narrative.
Yeah. And to be honest, it's my theory that this really all stems out of, and I think it set things into motion that automatically causes dialectical tensions. I don't want to get too theological in this episode, but I think there is a theological root to why the Anglos went that way, and they can't comprehend anything outside of that.
Hispanitas is Romanitas is Católicas. It's a universal empire. It's a universal empire. So yes, it's like, I mean, I recognize that indeed it is different. Like you cannot talk about Anglitas, at least extending it to people not genetically or ethnically Anglo-Saxon.
Right.
So he's right, but he's wrong, because I mean, it doesn't make sense to extend the equivalent of Hispanismo to the Anglo-Saxons, but not because Hispanismo doesn't make sense. It's because you can't, with the Anglo-Saxons didn't do what the Spanish did, so that you could then 500 years later talk about Hispanitas and not Anglitas.
Right.
Precisely. Let's continue this clip.
One sec. And the other point that I wanted to make was that, he said, like, are these Kenyans or Jamaicans or, people from, I don't know, the other Anglo-West Indies, are they Anglos? And I would say yes. Black Americans are gringos. If a Black American goes to Latin America, they are treated like gringos. They might be Black, but that's like a secondary differentiator or a secondary description to him being a gringo. I don't think he understands the concepts of things like, Romanization or Hispanization or Angloization. These people have been anglicized. Stryker himself is completely anglicized, in my opinion. You don't have to be 100% Spanish to be Hispanic, because there's such thing as Hispanization, right? Let's go back in our time machines. Let's think about Rome, right? I think it makes it more obvious for people. The Romans would go to Egypt. They beat the Egyptians up. The Egyptians would become Romanized, and then they would become incorporated and part of the empire. So this type of concept, he does not understand. Let's keep going.
Yeah.
Oftentimes, when you see stuff like, for example, cosmic race from Mexico, right? And I'll say this very critically of the whites who do this in Mexico. There's like a minority of white people. They dominate the country. A lot of them are crypto Jews, actually. But when someone like Vicente Fox declares,
I mean, another thing that's just like Anglo Black legend stuff. It's like no.
I invite him to northern Mexico to see if everybody. In my entire life, I have only met 2 Jews here in my
practicing
city.
It in secret so that you don't discover them.
Yeah, because they have a certain surname, and it probably means that they're Jews. Yeah, that's
also I have an entire website with every Spanish last name to ever exist that shows that all these names mean you're Sephardic. So checkmate.
Yeah. Basically, if you go into that, I think that I know the website pretty much every surname in the Spanish language is basically Jewish. So if a Jew happened to be at one time change his surname to a Spanish surname, then all of those people are now Jews by extension. That's extremely retarded.
Only if I don't like them.
Oh yeah, of course.
I mean, we're joking about this, but quite honestly, I don't know. I mean, I do know where he gets it from, but it's like I also don't know. It's like I understand why he would think that, because again, it's an Anglo projection of like, who's actually in charge in the Anglo world? Well, the Jews. That doesn't mean that the elites down here are crypto Sephardic Jews. Like that's total projection.
There's some, of course, like everywhere in the world, but that's not like our. We don't have the same problems with the Jews as they have in the Anglo war.
Well, and we recognize that, like, being a bad person in the elite does not mean that you're Jewish. Like, exactly. Not everything's just a racial or ethnic deductionism and just like, oh, that person's genetically Jewish. Like, they have to be bad. Like, they must be up to no good. Like, it's ridiculous.
Yeah.
Because I'm going to concede the point that maybe, there's a lot of crypto use here in Latin America. Okay, let's concede the point. Those peoples for hundreds of years have been like the most Catholic apologists in the history of the world. So unless you can explain that away, that they're going to hand-wave it away, and they're going to say that Catholicism is like a Jewish time bomb or something like that. But that's. No.
You gotta reject it wholesale. It's made up. It's not true. It's simply not true. Like the.
Well, one thing that I want to point out.
But maybe he doesn't. He didn't even say that, like, in the elites, in the people that actually rule. He said, like, in the contingent of white people that is still in Latin America and Hispanic America, most of them are crypto Jews. That's a total slander, dude. Like that's fucking scandalous.
Yeah. Well, again, one of the things that if you go to Latin America, there's no concept of anti-Semitism. There's no ADL. There's none of these organizations.
Exactly. Nothing.
Each, or you can't criticize, or you can't say anything against. It's like we don't really even know Jews. Like, Jews aren't a factor.
Yeah, for the most part, it's not.
In Uruguay, they are. But even there, they don't have the clout that they have in the Anglosphere. Even the Francosphere.
Yeah,
it's important to understand the context of this. It's like during the Spanish Empire, Judaism was literally outlawed, straight up. Under the Anglo-Saxon North America, these people were.
You know, when the Reconquista happened, the same year that Columbus comes here and, you know, quote unquote discovers America, the you know, Isabel and Ferdinand expelled the Jews and the Moors, the Muslims, from the peninsula. What did the English do under Cromwell? They invited them in to come finance, you know, the pirate empire into something more legitimate
and marry into the royal family.
So
it's scandalous is what I'm telling you. It's projection. It's the typical Anglo projection. The way Anglos behaved, it's the way things are in the Anglo world is the way things are everywhere. Right. So if the Anglo world has problems with diversity, that means we all are having problems with diversity. If the Anglos are ruled by a tiny Jewish elite, that means we're all ruled by a tiny Jewish elite. It's ridiculous.
Absolutely. Okay, let me keep going here.
What is it? A cosmic mestizo. What he's doing is he's duping the Indians of his country. And they use that Hispanism. It's like Zoltanis was saying, it's just a way to retain certain types of power relations. Now, I don't believe, and I catch flack because, for example, I was supporting Evo Morales in Bolivia and the Native Americans there, because I think Bolivia, which is like 95% Native American, their government should reflect the population. I don't think like some like bottle blonde like some bottle blonde mixed race porn star that's backed by Washington.
That's why I support the Zapatistas, which is probably.
Oh man, I like scratch myself.
Can I just read some of these notes here that I have? Jesus.
Yeah. Give me one sec. Okay. I actually wanted to touch because he talked about Raza Cósmica, referencing Jose Vasconcelos, and what's so interesting about Vasconcelos that you guys might not know, or some people in the audience, is that he actually was inspired to write Raza Cósmica by guess who? An Uruguayan writer named Jose Enrique Rodo, who wrote a book called Ariel, which was a very influential work in the 1900s. And the work is opposed to Anglo-cultural influence. And it kind of emphasizes the redemptive power of education and culture. So
yeah, that sounds like Vasconcelos, pretty much.
There would be no Raza Cósmica, there would be no Vasconcelos if it were not for an Uruguayan.
Yeah, and the conception of race of Vasconcelos is much more similar to the one that Ebola exposes. It's something like more spiritual that you try to strive for, that you want to go to a higher. Yeah. It's a metaphor. You're trying to attain a higher spiritual form. Like in that time, he actually said that the white people were in a higher spiritual realm, and the mestizos here in Latin America were trying to ascend to that kind of. But it wasn't like like a racial determinist thing that everybody was trying to attain like to a higher spiritual realm of existence. So,
well, I would argue that like Vasconcelos kind of made the argument that that like because of this mixing that took place, it was going to take extra time for what he considered to be the mestizos, which would later become the fifth race, to surpass the white Anglo-Saxon world from up north, in which he actually spent some time in school in. And that was his prediction was. His prediction was because this Anglo society shunned what they perceived to be the non-white in their society, and because the Hispanic world absorbed these people and created a new race, one that was based on love and acceptance, that this would ultimately lead to a fifth race that was going to be of the future, that was going to be dominant on the Western Hemisphere.
Right. Okay, why don't you read up some of the notes that we had here regarding his little statement here about Bolivia.
Precisely. And just real quick, if anyone here is curious, I actually did an English audiobook for La Raza Cósmica on my channel, if you guys want to hear it. But yeah, here's some of the notes I have here. So it says here, this is regarding Stryker's comment, Bolivia's 95% this is completely ludicrous. I don't even know how he got this. Bolivia is, if you look at it ostensibly, it's a majority mestizo country. And this is typical for most Spanish American states. In fact, the fact that the genetic influence found in its mestizaje emphasizes the indigenous element more than other places doesn't make it any less inherently mestizo. In fact, applying this logic, we could characterize Chile, for example, where yes, most of these people are mestizo, but they tend to be more on they tend to have more European ancestry on average. You could argue that Chile is a 95% European country using this logic, when in reality, these are people who white nationalists would ostensibly consider to be mixed race people that they wouldn't want anywhere near their daughters, for example.
I think he meant like 95% of the population. I mean, what he said was factually wrong, but I think the correct, like taking that 95%, it would be something like, in Bolivia, 95% of population has like indigenous background, or which is, that's not the same to say as saying that they are 95% native.
I think he was arguing they're mostly Indian.
I think he
he was, but I'm saying that he got confused. And like the actual number, like if we want to honor the 95%, then assuming he didn't make it whole cloth, I think what he read was that 95% was can trace some ancestry to to natives, basically, something like that.
Yes, and just to keep adding on to the notes here. So this woman that he's regarding to is, I think he claimed she was kind of like a blonde white woman who was put into power. Yeah, Janine, after Morales got the CIA treatment that these people usually get when they try to stand up for themselves, for their country. Here's what's interesting about this, the fact that Stryker's claiming she's white. She's not. Her ethnic background and phenotype is mestizo. It's a mixture of European and indigenous, and it's actually, her Indian side is quite prominent, if you ask me.
Yeah, she would not pass as white in the United States.
And not only that, she's also not a pornographer. He claimed that she was in pornography. No, this comment that he's referring to, this stems from a viral pornographic video that was allegedly containing this president, but ultimately was deemed that this was a Mexican woman that just kind of looked like her.
Yeah,
that's all it was.
And I think it had a similar name, so it was like confused. But okay, that happens.
I mean, she's not even blonde. Like she clearly dyes her hair. So it's like so. This is about this is a show of like the problem with Anglos, even if they're Uruguayan, right? Even if they come from Uruguay, it's like they just don't do the research, man. Look at OG, look at us. Like in Mundo Republiqueto, we do our show in Spanish. We want to talk about Colombia. We bring actual Colombians and go like, okay, so what's happening in your country? Explain it to us, because we don't know. Right. And we just go like, yeah, okay, so the guy told us this, right? But with Anglos, is this thing? It's just like, oh, I look at a picture once and like now I know how the world works. It's like it's endemic to them. It's like they just don't care. Like
I look at infographic and I know the word right now.
Yeah, I looked at the map and say I know the territory, because the map and the territory are the same thing according to these people.
I wanted No, by all means. I wanted to bring up that Bolivia is in fact the most indigenous country in terms of gene pool within Latin America. Yet still it's 35% Spanish in the gene pool, and about
they would have been considered cholos in the caste system,
and about 60% indigenous. Now, somebody in the audience brought up that we shouldn't overlook that there are tensions between some mestizos and some Indians.
Yep.
And that's true. You can find that in different countries. In Mexico, you can find that as well. But another dimension that needs to be understood by the audience is that you also have a category of quote unquote indigenous, at least racially, right? They're 95% indigenous, maybe a sprinkling of Spanish or something else. But they've been completely Hispanicized, meaning that they live and function as Hispanics. They don't speak a native language. They don't follow, any of the ancient indigenous cultures. Their culture is not apart from the mainstream culture of Bolivia or Mexico, to give you an example, or Guatemala. I think in Guatemala they call them Ladinos. But the point is that, and that's most of the indigenous in Latin America. most of the indigenous in Latin America are no longer culturally indigenous. They've been completely Hispanicized. So I want to just make that, real clear. Now you do have
here's a fun trivia for you, and I'm sorry, just wanted to say, like, this is a fun trivia fact for Stryker and the audience. Bolivia, which is 95% native or whatever, and blah blah blah. It's one of the only like departments, like it has only one of the last departments that still in the entire continent that still flies the Spanish Empire flag, the Aspa de Borgoña, the cross of Saint Andrew. And so, like, the department of Chuquisaca in Bolivia, which if you go to the department of Chuquisaca, it's not exactly white. Like, the people that live in Chuquisaca is not exactly white. So you have non-whites flying the Spanish Empire flag, even up to this day.
Well, not only that, but phalangism actually caught on the hardest in Bolivia out of, like, almost every Hispanic American country on top of that, if I'm not mistaken.
Yeah. So this idea that Stryker has, Bolivia should just, like, I don't know what he thinks. Like, should they just revert to go, to the Incan and, become Incan? And, like, this is the other thing that I wanted to bring up. It's like how pernicious the type of ideas that a Stryker espouses are for us, because we're trying to reunite our people after the independences, right? Like, we're trying to, again, make Hispanitas not something spiritual like we talk about, but something material, an actual sort of like Confederate States of Hispanic America, something like that. We're trying to wake our brothers up, even in the United States. This is why we're making this show in Spanish. And this guy is just like, no, like, fuck it, like, India's, like, you should have India rule again. Like, forget about the Spanish heritage or whatever. If you're brown, you can't have anything to do with white culture or white government or white anything. Just each, like, it would break us down into, like, even smaller republics, into even smaller and irrelevant countries. How convenient is it?
How convenient
how convenient for the American Empire to have what would be one of its historical rivals right now, which we are under the effects of defeat. We've been defeated, we have not been ruined. We are not dead, but we have been defeated, right? Like, the war's not over, but how convenient that we would keep, infighting and spiraling down into breaking down our countries into even more irrelevant, smaller countries that are easier to predate, right? But what matters is, like, the president looks like you. What matters is that if your country's kind of brown, your president has to be brown. Anything else doesn't matter.
Yeah. No, I mean, it's totally towing the line with what, has been probably one of the central themes of the Pocho Hour this past year, which is how, they're trying to atomize us to kind of undo the quilt that makes us into these component parts. See people on the other side of the dialectic, like Radical Latino, who wants us to identify as Black, as some kind of victim race or class, so we can fight the evil white man. And then you have who's, he's a blackwashed Hispanic. And then you have a whitewashed Hispanic like Stryker here doing the same thing on the opposite end. Trying to, I mean, how do you, and I mean, I know some countries are more mixed than others, you know what I'm saying? But it's like, how do you do this in a country like, say, Chile, where it's, or Paraguay, where it's almost 50% mixed,
Civil War.
How do you separate, because we all have, mixed families, right?
Yeah.
So I'm sure you have a cousin that probably looks like Chief Joseph. And I'm sure you have a cousin that looks like he just came from Germany, right? So it's like, and they're related. They have the same grandpa, So how do you separate this? There's no way to do this on a phenotypical basis. It's just
yeah. It will be disastrous. That's one of the reasons why we move away from white nationalists, because we saw that we tried to implement what the Americans, the white nationalists in America were trying to do. It would lead to complete chaos here in Latin America. So no, it doesn't work.
like for what? Like it's also pointless. It's like, well, what do you get? Like, okay, so now Bolivia is all indigenous back again, and they have nothing to do with the white man. Well, thank you. Congratulations, you just sent them to the Stone Age. Now the Chinese are just gonna come and do whatever they want, right? Like,
precisely. I want to read.
Hold on 1 second. This all feeds into, and maybe we should do an episode of this down the lane here, that the United States is in a demographic crisis, right? And we're talking about the Anglo chunk of the United States, whether you're black or white. Okay, you're all getting English. They're in demographic decline. The only thing that's propping up the United States, the biggest chunk that's propping up the United States, is the Hispanic immigrant. So one of the concepts that's flying around in their think tanks is of how do we get to 1 billion people, and well, guess what? There's about 300 million here and there's about 700 million south of the border. Why do they want to do this? Because they want to compete with billion people in China. So the Anglos want to Anglicize us. They want to absorb us.
Black openly talks about this.
That is the end goal of doing these things.
They want to make us gay.
Anglizing us. Say it again.
Yeah, they want to make us gay.
Global homo for everybody.
It's the last stand of white identity, truly.
Yeah, global homo.
Didn't one of the white nationalists say that homosexuality?
Yeah, Richard Spencer literally said that.
What did he say? Fucking guy, dude.
Yeah, I think it was a tweet, but it was taken out of context. But
it was probably a joke.
It was bad in context too, but we don't need to go into that. I want to read this actually. It's something Stryker wrote. Oh, okay. Keep going.
No, go ahead. Go ahead.
I thought you had something to say. Okay, let me read this. So Stryker said this as a response to a video I made last night saying this: Blacks and Indians aren't Hispanic or Latino. Their blacks and Indians are imitating their colonial masters. Go ask an average white Argentinian or a Spaniard what they think of the Peruvians/Paraguayans or Ecuadorian and Dominicans invading their country. Hispanicism is an internet meme. So I just want to ask you guys, since you live in Latin America, what do you think of that?
I think he, again, is conflating the issue that when you have emigration, like when people leave Latin America to quote unquote like invade Spain or something like that, it's usually the problem is that they're the poorest half, they're the poorest, they're proletarians, right?
Yeah.
So it's like, well, okay, so I ask Americans back in the 19th century what they thought about Germans and Irish, and I'm not trying to perpetuate the myth that they thought Irish were black, that the Irish were treated as black or were thought that they were black or anything like that. I'm talking about the real fact that the Irish and the Germans were not welcome. They were not liked. In fact, there were campaigns to de-Germanize and de-Irish, remove the Irish and the German from them.
And the Italians and the Poles, and
there was an ethnic and culturally cleansing situation that occurred.
Exactly. Yeah. And even Italians, like Italians, Irish, German. Why? Because you were getting the proletarians from Germany, from Ireland, and from all that. So it's the same situation here.
Well,
it's like
Tercio, have you ever heard of Noel Ignatieff, his book How the Irish Became White?
No.
Well, it's like a meme in white nationalist circles because they he says a lot of things that triggers these people. But what's funny is that's actually the argument he made. Like, I have the book right in front of me. I actually ordered it so I can do a book review on it later. That's literally what he argues. His argument is that groups like the Irish, yes, they were technically seen as white, but there was a hierarchy of who were the top whites in the United States for a long time. And Irish people had to prove their whiteness. And what did that involve? It involved differentiating blacks as being this people who were supposed to be the complete opposite as you in Anglo society in North America.
Yeah, there's a comment here that says that go ask an Anglo what he thinks of Slavic whites. Aren't Polish, like the Polish people, the butt of jokes?
They're like the Mexicans in Britain. Yeah, that's a huge. When we were in TRS, the Slavic question was often brought up because a lot of people in those circles didn't like Slavs.
Well, this is actually, I know this guy, Marcus Cicero. He's my friend. He actually used to be in the League of the South. He was a huge guy in that organization. And he's been told straight up, and you guys can ask him yourselves, that he's had these Anglo-Southern nationalists tell him to his face, you're a Slav, you're not white. Like, all the time.
Yeah. That happens all the time. Like, we know, like, we know, like we've been there. Like I had
we were in all the chat groups, in everything, and we were part of all those conversations. So
I had an inferiority complex because I was like, well, I'm Spanish, I'm white, okay, but I gotta accept that the Northern European is the master race, and I'm just like a second class white.
The Nordic ideal, yeah,
the Nordic, because that's the coordinate that they're going from. So going back again, what do the Spaniards think of whatever? Yeah, they probably don't like a bunch, like millions of thousands of proletarians, just invading up their country. Like, what does that prove?
Nobody likes mass immigration.
Yeah.
In general.
Let me make that point real quick. And this is a common manipulative tactic that people who disagree with Hispanismo seem to bring up a lot. Where, okay, if we embrace this Hispanic kind of macro civilizational identity, that means that all the Salvadorians are going to move to Mexico.
That means you support that.
And that means that all the Dominicans are going to go to Argentina. Like, no, accepting this level of identity does not mean that you want everyone from South Argentina to move to Northern Argentina. Does not mean you want to move Oaxaca to Jalisco.
Yeah, there's a thing that you can make to an argument that you can make to make these people probably understand it a little bit more, because in white nationalist circles they complain a lot of this infighting between the different ethnicities of North Europeans. And what they say is that we were fighting about really stupid shit. So we should come together to stand the mass immigration and all of these Jewish conspiracies and all of those kind of things. We could make the same argument for Hispanic America, that despite our differences and despite our different ethnic and nationalities, we should come together for protection. Basically, that's the same argument.
That doesn't mean just erase Dominican culture in the heartland of Mexico and undo Jalisco's unique culture.
It's
into there. Yeah, this is hold on one sec. This is reducing our position to the ridiculous, because they can't argue with our position directly. So they have to reduce it into something ridiculous that they then can argue against, which is a very fucking. Are you there, Tercio?
Sorry. Yeah. I'm sorry. Didn't mean to. I get excited.
Go ahead, add to it.
There's two things that I want to say. This is typical of people that don't have any actual power, don't have any actual responsibility, are not close to power, are not close to any sort of political, they're not serious, but it's what I'm trying to say. It's a very immature thing to argue because we don't like each other personally, that means we can't form any sort of political, we can't, that informs the political. You understand? It's because Brazil and let's use Brazil. Brazil and Argentina fight because of football, and they don't like each other because of football. That means that politically, there's nothing we can do. As if we're talking political stuff here, okay? Not only do I like each other? Do I like every Spanish person? Oh, well, no, And the other thing that I wanted to say, I forgot. I know. I remember now. I have the opposite example of Spanish complaining about millions of Paraguayans moving to Spain, which is a Spaniard moving to Peru, to the jungle in Peru, okay? And the Spanish person telling me these people are closer to me than what Norwegians or Swedes are. And we have that show on our channel, mundorepubliqueto, of a Spanish guy. He still lisps, okay? He still has the lisp, and he tells you no, this people in the Amazon, they're very close to me. They're just like me. They're just like me, a Spaniard, and I feel closer to them than I ever felt close to a Prussian or a Swede or something like that. So that is my response to Stryker. It's nobody likes a million proletarians invading their country at once, but that doesn't mean anything.
I mean, this happened in the United States.
It happens in Colombia and Venezuela. They even used to be the same country.
Well, what's funny about Colombia and Venezuela is that some of the Venezuelans immigrating come from Colombians who had immigrated the other way.
Well, no, because in the 1950s, Venezuela was booming economically. Yeah, so it's but just because like a lot of Venezuelans, because they're like flooding into Colombia in large numbers because of Maduro's incompetency, just because Colombians don't like that doesn't mean like they have some sort of racial animosity against these people who are genetically very similar to Colombians already.
Yeah, or that we have nothing in common. That we have nothing in common. That it's just like completely different people.
If there's an example of like sister countries in Latin America, it's Colombia, Venezuela. Like
it's absurd. It's absurd. They're two different countries. It's absurd.
It's probably as close to the Northern Triangle of Central America, where it's just kind of, or even Las Antillas, perhaps. But I think even more. I think Venezuela and Colombia are even more alike than even these other examples.
Especially the coast of Colombia, I would argue too.
Yeah, it's absurd.
But I want to make a point, you guys, of the Okies, right? And during the Dust Bowl in the United States, you know, most of the white Californians come from Okies, and the kind of the elite Anglos who already kind of established here, who kind of, you know, stole a lot of land even after in denying certain treaties that were made, and you know, did the thing that they do in order to get what they want. The Okies, you know, were looked down upon and hated because they came and they flooded California. I mean, you can read John Steinbeck's books to learn all about this stuff. So, you know, mass migration is not good for the people who are migrating, the people who are being, you know, the destination country. Even if we're the exact same race, I mean, you know, bring it down to the individual level. I always give this example. I can have a twin brother who with a family who has 3 kids, and maybe he's having some bad luck and he's down and out. And I'm like, dude, you can come stay at my place for, you know, a couple months till you get back on your feet. You know, after a couple days, it's going to get fucking annoying.
Yeah.
You know, I'm going to want him to get the fuck out of my house.
Yeah.
This is obvious stuff, you know?
Obvious stuff.
Yeah, you could make a comparison, for example, with when the nation of Israel was being created in the late 1940s. A lot of Jews that lived there for a very long time didn't want all the Ashkenazi Jews coming into the country, because it was going to make a mess of that place. It was going to make a lot of trouble for them. So even within those classic groups of the Jews and all of that stuff, that they didn't have that. Yeah, they didn't want mass migration from European Jews.
America had a lot of, from the very beginning, a lot of Sephardic and Jews from Germany specifically. And these Jews were specifically a lot more integrated into what was considered white American society in comparison to these Eastern European Jews post-Civil War, who had a much more rebellious spirit about them. And actually, E. Michael Jones has a great book that goes into detail about this. But yeah, exactly. It's these same dynamics that you were just talking about here.
I want to add one last thing, because I've lived this massive migration thing. You know, I saw when people were fine with the migrants and when they stopped, because I moved to Peru back in 2017, and there were, you know, few Venezuelans here. There was the massive exodus from Venezuela to Peru had not started yet. And, you know, from 2017 to like 2018, like Peruvians were very welcoming, very understanding of Venezuelans. There were no problems. Everybody understood that was, you know, people in the country were going through some tough stuff. And I saw how gradually, you know, people starting to get fed up, because it was like more Venezuelans and more Venezuelans and more Venezuelans and more Venezuelans. And again, these weren't like wealthy Venezuelans that were just coming in, you know, making fantastic, money investments or whatever. These were people that were beggars. They had nothing. They crossed the borders on foot, right? And so I saw that. It was like, yeah, a few, you know, a trickle of Venezuelans, everybody's fine. Everybody treats them as brothers. Everybody's very understanding. 1 million Venezuelans, people will go like, okay, yeah, like, okay, close the border. Close the border.
Let's have some, let's be reasonable here, you know? It's very silly, and this is a common tactic. This straw man is constantly brought up, not just by Wignats, but even kind of nationalists, of different countries in Spanish America. They bring this up as well. Having some kind of united front politically on the global stage, embracing the commonality of what binds us together, does not mean move, Panama all the way into Nicaragua. This doesn't mean that. Panama, there's a land called Panama. You can stay there. You can embrace it. We don't want to undo, even again, let's zoom into a country like Mexico. We don't want to undo Jalisco's unique culture and make it like Oaxaca. Nobody wants that. They're both Mexican, right? Like, you're Mexican. I mean, you know what I'm saying? Like, there's unique things to preserve everywhere.
Yeah,
and we don't
gringos have a very hard time understanding Catholic universalism, like true universalism, which is unity. Unity with multiplicity. They don't understand that concept of having unity with multiplicity, because for them, the equivalent to Catholicism would be globalism, which is uniformity through fake individualism, which is exactly what Stryker is advocating. He's advocating this fake identitarian, individualist stuff, like Bolivia is brown, so therefore it needs a brown government, brown president. That's in the Stone Age, so we can go and get all the lithium so that Elon Musk can build his Teslas, basically.
Precisely. And I have another quote here by Stryker that he made yesterday about my video real quick. It says this: Mestizaje is a Mexican and American, and he says here in parentheses, La Raza ideology. Not universal in the widely distinct countries of the Spanish-speaking world. It's something 100% white Mexicans like Vicente Fox made up to stop Indians from rebelling against them, that Jews in the U.S. took up to fund a new anti-white activist bloc in America.
This is like talking to somebody like a trans advocate about trans stuff. It's like, it's so wrong. Where do you even begin, right? Like,
I guess he never heard of Hernan Cortez. He never really read about that guy and what he did. I guess he's never heard of Rubén Darío. Mestizaje is a concept.
What they're trying to do is to falsify our history, because you will have to deny what is as clear as day, that countries like Mexico and Colombia and Nicaragua and all of those places are basically mestizo nations, racially speaking. So I don't know. Okay, maybe Vicente Fox wasn't the greatest guy ever, and I'm not trying to defend him, but that's levels of conspiracy theory that I think where they come from. It's from some leftist circles here in Mexico that try to strung up some kind of conspiracy regarding the Yunque and something like that. That Vicente Fox is like a great, white Hispanic racist oppressor here, which is very far from the truth. Vicente Fox is probably more like a non-aligned leftist progressive at this time. That's trying to get marijuana legalized here in Mexico. So,
all right, let's resume this clip here, shall we?
Yeah.
Probably surprising for some people.
Right. So, like, people wealthy European Jewish descended capitalists in Mexico, they have no solidarity with the people they govern, and they have no solidarity with other people of European descent. They take all their poor Indians and they send them to America. Fuck them.
This is true. This is true.
Groups like the Zapatistas, I support them to an extent, in the sense that they are indigenous. They fight for their people's rights. The vast majority of people in Mexico are some kind of Indian, and they should be able to have a government that looks like them. That's a universal principle.
Why?
That I think is ethical and justified.
Why?
I'm not for oppressing Native Americans. You see this in Bolivia too.
Are we oppressing Indian Americans here in Mexico? I don't know.
I mean, you could argue, in some sense, the Republican governments have not been good to the Indios. I mean, Stryker is partially right on this. Like,
although most Mexicans are not some type of Indian, most are very much mestizo with a very even split. I should just add in.
In his narrative, they have to be Indians. You have to understand that, because if he if he accepts that we're mixed race and we don't fall like in this neat, the description of how they see the world, then it all falls down. We are no longer the oppressed people that need to be saved from the Jews here too.
Yeah, but he is right that Latin American elites, Hispanic American elites, and this is a criticism that we make, have mostly been very bad. Like, have mostly been, they have mostly sold out our countries to foreign interests. And so I will say, healthy disdain for capitalism I can get behind, and like liberalism and that kind of like
hold on, but it's been, my point though is it's been bad for everybody. Like these Latin American criollos, they're not pulling out like this skin tone graph and seeing like we need to oppress these people that are darker. Like that's not how they operate.
Yes, and that's where he's wrong. He's right in that our elites have been complete sellouts, and they don't really care about the country or its people. But it's like, it applies to everybody. It's not like the whites here are like, we gotta.
I know plenty of poor people in Medellin that look whiter than Eric Stryker, and they're not doing well because our leaders fucking suck.
Yeah. I have a little observation to make here. The richest people here in Mexico are not Jews. One of the richest people here in Mexico, his name is Carlos Slim, and he's from Lebanese descent, and he's a Maronite Catholic. And the other very rich person, is Ricardo Salinas Pliego, which is the owner of TV Azteca and Electra and Banco Azteca, and he's basically the largest loan shark here in the continent, and he's Catholic too. He's of Spaniard descent.
Yeah, Stryker will be surprised that our bankers are ethnically of whatever, the Spaniards are not, Spanish.
They're mostly Basque.
They're mostly Basque.
Parenthesis, Basque, parenthesis.
I wait.
Let's continue on here. Well, actually, I wanted to bring up the point that he said something about the Zapatistas. Wasn't the Zapatistas headed by a blue-eyed or green-eyed guy?
Yeah, their leader's green-eyed.
Subcomandante Marcos. Yeah, he's an Italian he's from Italy. He's an Italian communist that moved here to Mexico, and he ended up with the Zapatistas. He's not the leader, but he's the spokesperson for them.
So he's like, I forget the name of that conquistador who went native. And
there were a lot of those.
When Cortez found him, he's like, "No, fuck you, I'm Mayan now."
I mean, I just want to add that this idea that, I think it is somewhat reasonable to say that, yes, people that govern you should be somewhat like you. We don't want to have like completely, I think there's some merit to this idea. I don't want to say like, no, like whatever. I think there's a valid intuition. There's a valid desire for people, to sort of like be ruled. I think people want to be ruled by good rulers. I don't actually think they care too much about the identitarian aspect, but I want to give some merit. I want to give some merit to the idea. There's like history contradicts Stryker, because again, like blacks and Indios were largely on the side of the Spanish crown during independence. It wasn't like this racial war of browns fighting whites for their independence. So again, he's wrong, but there is something to that idea. But this is the problem. He does not. He needs to. He hasn't taken the empire pill, basically, where an empire has to rule over a vast territory, okay, and the ruler is not necessarily always going to be like you, but it doesn't mean that he doesn't have your best interest in mind, or that he will be a good leader, okay. Right. So what we don't want. This is a problem with identitarianism. We don't want samey rule or rule by somebody that's just like me. I would we need good rulers.
Well, I would say this, like, if you look at the Criollo elites of Latin America, right? What are these people genetically? Well, they're not pure white. Most of these people are a mix of, low-class Spanish nobility plus Indian nobility, and they both married into each other historically. Right. So despite the fact that these people are both from very important roots, both the Indian and the Spanish roots, they still engage in oftentimes very traitorous behavior. And it's like, I want someone that actually gives a shit about governing over just what their racial genotype is.
La viveza criolla, basically, we want to get rid of that.
I mean, and this is the problem with this identity, like the paradox of racism that these people have, in which they tell you like race is more than skin, like it's deeper than it's more than skin deep. But then they tell you things like this, like, no, your rulers should look like you. It's like, but wait a second. Like, why does it matter? Like I thought like maybe they should be like me spiritually, like me culturally, like me ethnically. No. They literally they have to have your skin. So which is it? It's like, is it skin deep, where everybody has to have the same phenotype, or is there a cultural, spiritual, whatever component? And this is again the empire pill. It's like they don't. If they have let's say the spirit, right? If they're a good Catholic ruler for Catholic people, then who cares that the Philip II had green eyes?
That's what I was going to say. How did the Habsburgs come to rule the Spanish Empire, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. These concepts, this historical level of understanding, it's a very tall order for these people, because they're so stuck in a modern frame of thinking. And we've touched on this. This is what contrasts really with the Hispanic world, is that there's a pre-modern element that has not gone away in Hispanoamerica,
And there's the fact that we were an empire first, not a nation that became an empire like England or Germany or France. We were an empire first. And so now they're trying to fit this nationalist nationhood mold into us. And we are rebelling against it. It doesn't fit. It doesn't work for us. We are a people that has a universal empire calling and formation. So this idea, like the nationalism and like people should look like you and your ruler should look like you and no, we were an empire first. Spain was an empire first, and it overflew its container in Europe, and it basically poured itself out here in the Americas and the Philippines, because he's going to bring that up later too.
Yes, let's keep going.
The people that are from Wall Street that own all the different natural gas industries there, but also the local, some people call them white, whatever they are. Those guys send all their Bolivians to Argentina. So there's millions of Bolivians living in Argentina now because the ruling class in their country does not has disenfranchised them and sends them abroad. So I support nationalism for all these different groups. It's very simple.
I'm going to read what Zero Schizo was saying in the chat. Since he's an old friend of the show, I'm going to read a couple of things he said in the chat here while you were explaining all that. He says, that's a Spaniard. A Hispanic is someone who has his cultural roots in Spain. It is not relevant if he is from Germany or from the Andes. It is a civilizational identity. Borsley tells Stricker that's a civilizational identity, like being Roman or Ottoman or something like that. So that's his perspective on that.
Okay. Would Zero Schizo say that that people living in the Commonwealth, in the British Commonwealth, is that a civilizational identity then? Or Kenyans, Anglo-Saxons?
You could probably argue that the Atlanticist identity is more like an Anglo construct, and America is kind of an extension of Anglos and like Jews. So you could probably argue that for modern Western civilization is Atlanticist.
We already went through this. We already went through this. Just to reiterate, I mean, yes, they are a product of Anglo civilization. Even their destitute state right now, you can say that it has been manufactured. I mean, not to take away any responsibility from the Africans themselves, right? Like we don't want to fall into like my colonialism game or whatever. But yeah, British colonialism was very bad. European colonialism in Africa in general, including Spanish, was very bad. So yeah, they're part of like, I mean, they're not part of the Anglo civilization in the sense of like they're not recognizably Anglo, right? Like in 200 years, China takes over, whatever. I doubt there's going to be very little, some aliens come and they're not going to think like, oh yeah, this Africans had something to do with this island here over in Europe. But I think they will find it very hard to say that here in America we had nothing to do with the Iberian Peninsula, right?
Yeah. Yeah, and I wanted to read some notes on the mythology of the white southern cone, Argentina, southern Brazil, Uruguay. I'll just read this off. So a seemingly omnipresent talking point relating the gringo discourse regarding Argentina, Uruguay, and the southern states of Brazil is their supposed white character. Referring strictly to the material genetic realities on the ground, Argentina is a mestizo state where the European element tends to be more predominant than in other areas of the continent. Specifically, studies have identified that the average porteño, that is someone from Buenos Aires, is approximately 85% European, with the rest being native, with the ratio evening out as you head further away from Buenos Aires. So Buenos Aires is this huge city, but as you go into the interior of the country, there's a gradient that starts to form. 70-30 in some states, that's 70% European, 30% indigenous. Then it becomes 60-40, and then in other areas it approaches 50-50. So one of the things to understand about Argentinian history is that at one point Argentina was actually as mestizo as Mexico. But then you had this huge flood of European immigration, which has to do a lot with the demographics. There was a point, I believe in like the mid 1800s, where there was more people in Italy than all of South America, regardless of race. So, Argentina was flooded by Europeans. And I think there's been some mixed results because of that, not necessarily good ones automatically. But let me continue.
What's funny real quick is Eric Stryker also used to talk up Juan Perón a lot and would talk about how much he loved him. Perón himself was a mestizo, just so everybody understands.
Right. In the case of Brazil, the situation is similar, with studies showing the average self-identified branco, that means white, to usually be around 80% European in origin, often less. Regarding Uruguay, we don't possess any data, but from personal experiences, friends from Uruguay, the situation seems to be similar to people from Buenos Aires or the Brazilian brancos. Final points here. This, however, leads into two important issues in white nationalist discourse. One, the notion that people of Southern European heritage somehow fall into the category of white. And two, the often misunderstood relationship between genotype and phenotype, which is a huge, huge thing that does get overlooked. The people of Southern Europe, the Iberians, Italians, Occitanians, coastal Balkan peoples have traditionally occupied a different position to Germanic or Brittonic peoples within the field of anthropology. The Mediterranean gene pool distinguished itself by having a different majority element, that of the Neolithic farmer populations, as well as a myriad of other genetic influences hailing from North Africa, Anatolia, the Levant, and Persia. The Neolithic farmer element, although still present, is less pronounced in the populations of what did he mean here? Eastern Europe? Well, I'm not sure. There's a typo here. Moreover, instead of the Mediterranean influences common in the southern coast, Central and Northern Europe have historically received a non-negligible Central Asian influence, which is rarely talked about.
Except for
beyond the genetic
II.
argument. Yeah. Even beyond the genetic argument, I personally consider secondary to an intuitive and organic understanding of ethnicity. The technological division between North and South in the European continent has been historic reality for millennia. with the two constant competition and struggle with one another, often due to irreconcilable differences of religious and cultural character. The current coexistence of North and South within the European continent is the product of American conquest and pacification during World War II, not a sign of some sort of civilizational unity. So basically what our writer here is saying is that these people, Europe has been placated because it's been Americanized. And I think a lot of Europeans would agree with this.
Especially, Northern Europe. And it gets worse the more northern and in the British Isles you go.
I mean,
yeah, especially Western
Europe. I mean, there is a kind of like imperial push inside Europe. It's not a very powerful empire, but within Europe, like the European Union is basically the Franco-German empire now. But yes, I mean, I would say most of Europe is a colony of the United States, same as Hispanic America.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah. And can you keep reading, Noel?
Yeah, so basically, in conclusion, Southern Europeans are not white. They are Portuguese. They are Castilian. They are Hellenes, but they are not white. And this is written by a European from Spain, actually. So.
Also, read the second point if you can.
Okay, sure. So the results of multi-generational mestizaje are not a series of consistent phenotypes, but a number of highly divergent and unique results, as noted by Vasconcelos. A couple of mestizo type may produce children with different skin tones, facial structures, and general racial type. If Stryker was an actual Hispano, not a gringo, he would know this. Not every phenotypically European Hispano is of singular ancestry. It's very common for such people to have siblings of a less European aspect, or for their parents to be lighter or darker skinned than them. The highly broad nature of the Spanish American gene pool is even broader than the Southern European one, and it produces a variety of phenotypes. We did touch on this, right? We talked about it because it's like, for example, I have a brother that looks like a white version of me, and I have a sister who looks very Native American. So it's like, how do you reconcile that? You know, my mom sometimes gets confused with Filipino. You know, like we'll be at supermarkets, you know, when I was a kid, and Filipinos would come up to speak. So, you know, this is it's just, I mean, you know, my wife, she's a quarter Lebanese, a quarter Venetian, a quarter Afro-Colombian, and a quarter mestiza. So it's like, you know, my son looks like a more Native American version of me. Okay. But with reddish hair. Okay. So it's like, how do you,
I was going to say,
he's right.
In my family, I'm actually the darkest like person, the most Indio looking one. And I have like mestizo siblings that look like way whiter than Eric Stryker that would just pass as normal white people. And the problem is, if you go by this sort of racial deductionism that these sorts of people, these Wignats are trying to sell to people like us, if we were to listen to Eric Stryker, this would impact our families in a very negative way. This would have people, our own siblings, turning on each other and putting ourselves in different racial categorizations, despite the fact that we share the exact same parents. It's stupid, and it's not for us.
This is why we have to fight this stuff, on both sides. We have to fight the indigenous, you know, the brown supremacists and the white supremacists. You know, we have to fight the brown indigenous and the white indigenous, the ones that tell you like, you gotta be with your white people, and so you know they would tear apart all of our families and divide us. And like, well, you know, you go to the white part, whatever. Like, even though they're German, you have nothing to do with them. It's just nonsense. I also see it in my family. Both my father-in-law and my mother-in-law look very white, and then my wife is also very white, but she has a Syrian face. And then my brother-in-law, he has very Spanish like features in his face, but he's brown.
Right,
like me.
Right, exactly. I mean, you know, you see, there's just so many variations. You have people who are very light and have Afro features, right? Like they even have red hair, freckly. And then, you know, you have like my wife, she's quite dark, but she has a very white looking face. You know what I'm saying? So it's like you have natives, people with a native phenotype who are blonde, like dirty blonde, and have blue eyes and green eyes. And this happens a lot in Mexico. I have tons of neighbors who are basically green-eyed Indios. You know what I'm saying?
Yep.
So it's for us, these racial categories just simply do not work, cannot work, won't work. And they're just tools of our civilizational enemies to break us apart at a point where they're in demographic decline and we're not.
Yeah, that's an incredible problem, because in my family, in my mother's side of the family, I have cousins that are blonde and cousins that are almost dark skinned, and I'm in the middle in a way. And in my other side of the family, pretty much everybody is white. But yeah, it all devolves into fucking chaos. That's the problem. If we apply the coordinates of white nationalism into our cosmovision. So it would be a disaster. We cannot have that.
And this is the point that Jose Miguel White Hernandez made. He said, even if we divide it up by phenotype, the genetic spread is still there. The next generation would be a mix. You can't unmix what God mixed together.
Which is why they dislike race mixing, right? Like this is basically why they don't like it. But it doesn't work with us. It's like, I mean, kudos to them that they managed to keep their population separated and pure.
Yeah, now you can have pure kids having like drag queen story hour being read to them. It's wonderful, isn't it?
That wasn't even my point. It was like, okay, you did it, but we didn't. So whatever your model is, whatever you think, you cannot apply it to us. Okay, sure, yeah. We have to do something else. We have to go forward some differently. We can't just take white nationalism or brown nationalism. We can't take identity politics. We cannot take identity politics. It doesn't work. Okay, for us, like maybe they love Rahowa and all that. They wish they could do it. They wish they could have the Rahowa War, right? You can see what was the book, the
Turner Diaries. You're probably
Turner Diaries. Thank you. Where the book ends up where the white race kills every other race. That's their dream. That's their model. Go ahead, like try it. Go ahead. Like, how is it going for you? Your civilization having been like this. Good luck. We don't need your stuff. You failed, okay? You failed. You failed as an empire. We don't care about you. We have our own model. We don't need you.
Yeah. Let's keep going.
Yeah.
In Latin American history of some figures like Simon Bolivar, even
just the fact he said Simon Bolivar. He said Simon. Okay. I'll keep going.
On Perón to some degree, that believe concept. But the problem is, whatever their flaws or pros and cons may be, they've always struggled to really make sense of that, because frankly, people in these countries don't like each other. People in Colombia don't like people in Venezuela, and vice versa. People, you talk to a white working class person.
Okay, and they hate and that's true even for Europe, inside America.
I mean, we've been over this on the stream.
Yeah,
nobody
it's
likes
stupid. Apply it to yourself, you goddamn hypocrite.
Just look at the history of Europe. These people have been killing each other in that continent based on ethnic and religion and they're still doing it if you go to Northern Ireland. And how many wars have there been between Venezuela and Colombia? How many genocides? These were just border scuffles. They didn't even count as wars. Yeah, they're just dudes with a lot of testosterone and guns. But yeah, it's very, very ridiculous.
It's very remarkable, the fact that we have very little external wars. We've had tons of civil and internal conflicts in our different countries, but external wars like Venezuela going to war with Brazil or something like that, very few. You can count them with your fingers, basically.
That's true. That's very true. And another point. Go ahead if you want to finish your thought.
No, but I would just want to say, like, Europe. Europeans have been at each other's throats forever, but they're all brothers. They're all one people.
Yeah. That actually reminds me of a point that I brought up. I think, it's to say that your average, Jalicense is very simpatico with a person from, Antioquia in Colombia or Chile. They're far more similar than, say, a person from Finland and Andalusia. Like how is it that in this white European identity you're able to fit Finns and Andalusians?
And I've been to Finland and Andalusia. These people could not be any more different from each other, believe me.
But somehow under white identity that works, even though that's never worked. And, Hispanic identity is somehow written off as some kind of internet meme. I find it so silly. I wanted to add one more point to the conversation regarding how Colombians hate Venezuelans. Go to Miami, you fucking idiot. Like, go to Miami and see how many half Brazilian Puerto Ricans you find, half Brazilian Nicaraguans you find, Peruvian Cubans, Argentine Salvadorians. Like, this is ridiculous. Go to any place where Hispanics of different countries are able to actually congregate, work, and live together, and see how much mixing. I mean, it's crazy that there's no studies on this, but there are studies of like Hispanics with other races or whatever, but there's no studies inter-Hispanic mixing in the United States. Precisely. In every generation, you're going to find more and more people who are half Cuban, half Puerto Rican, half Honduran, half Puerto Rican, Dominican, Nicaraguans. I mean, just give it another generation and see how much more when you have people who are Mexican, Puerto Rican on one parent and, Nicaraguan, Salvadorian on another.
Yeah, I think that in those cases, the religion and the family disposition is more important than what nationality you are. But going back to the point, let's say that okay, we hate each other here in Latin America. That's like superficial chauvinism. We actually made an episode of Soda like a year ago, Tercio and the other guys. Yeah, so it's like
what was the name of the episode? I want to...
El chauvinismo, el chauvinismo de las superficialidades, something like that.
Yeah, that's it.
Let me look it up.
Yeah, I have it here. I think it's episode number 28 in Spotify.
Okay, perfect. Okay, thank you. I'll keep going.
I was gonna say, I think we'd probably just continue to clip. Unless anyone's got anything more.
I thought Paul was gonna finish a point.
Oh, well, it's like I said before, that even if that's true, that we have all of these problems with ourselves, that we hate each other, we come back to what I said before about the things that were happening in Europe and all of that even the white nationalists will recognize that this infighting among white people, it's stupid. So why don't apply it here in Latin America? That we're just fighting about stupid shit that doesn't really matter.
Yeah, it's a superficial thing. Again, you can take people's words on things, or you can actually see what's going on the ground. And if you go to Los Angeles, if you go to Texas, if you go to Southern Florida, even in New York City, you find it as well. But New York City's it's kind of a weird place to grow up in. But I've met Mexican Dominicans. You know what I'm saying? And so it shows you, it's like you're saying, the national identity kind of fizzles behind, and this kind of ethnic identity, this kind of macro ethnic identity comes out, and it allows people to relate because we have the same language, we have the same customs, we have the same worldview, we have the same kind of religious upbringing. You might be a slightly different skin tone or from a different color from me, but or a different country from me, but it doesn't matter. I'm from Nicaragua. I'm able to relate to a costeña colombiana very, very naturally. It doesn't feel like I'm married to someone from a different country. I don't feel like I'm married to, like, say, a Persian girl or a Lebanese girl, a Turkish girl. That's a completely different civilization, ethnicity, paradigm, worldview.
And I will add that this also extends to Spain. I have, talked to many Spaniards that tell me that, they were doing their studies in Germany or in Norway or whatever. And whenever they found the little group of like Peruvians or Paraguayans, the Paraguayans, they felt like, they said like, oh, these are my people. I feel at home with them. Of course, because if you're a Paraguayan studying in Norway or whatever, you're not a proletarian.
We
so
speak
of course
Spanish. Yeah, that's a huge thing that weaves together in this part of the continent.
Sure.
So
yeah, but even beyond the language, I mean, it's the mind. One of the things that I think English speaker only people have an issue with is understanding how the English language limits the mind. It's like you're only allowed to think with the language, and in the Spanish language, because of that, there's a mind frame, there's a worldview associated with it. There's a metaphysical system. It's not necessarily written down as like, here's the Hispanic philosophy, but without being spoken, it's lived. It's lived. If you go to a rural community in Colombia, they might have a different accent from a rural community in Mexico, but essentially at the beyond the accent, there's not a difference. It's a regional difference, but essentially there's not a difference. The Rancho culture is the same.
We could make the same distinctions inside the United States. Why don't make that put that roadblock to white nationalism inside the United States with all the internal divisions? One of the huge fights that happened inside TRS that Stryker is going to remember is the fight that happened with the rebel jail crowd, the Southern nationalist. Mm-hmm. And then that was like a huge rift that happened between them. And it was inside the United States, inside white people, for example. Right. The difference that are between Texas and the East Coast and all of that. It's why don't make those distinctions there, and then why they don't matter inside the United States suddenly.
Right. And I want to just say this real quickly as well before we continue this clip. The American empire is also tactically, it's not just Zapatistas or Indigenista movements here in Latin America, but the American empire is attempting to divide, even like if we just use Spain as example, through tactical nationalism, as I would call it, as a way to, like, for example, things like Catalonian nationalism, Basque separatism, Andalusia separatism. These are all tactical things where they know if they just continue to divide the Spanish-speaking world, the Hispanic world, that, they're going to get a much weaker group of people to essentially rule and dominate over.
I bet you money that Stryker favors Catalonian Basque independence, and if he doesn't, it's because he somehow
he actually doesn't. No, he's actually talked about this publicly. He's said that when they try to separate Spain, it makes Spain weaker, and this is done tactically by the European Union, which he blames on the small hats, of course. But he gets it. He gets that.
Yeah, he gets it in Spain because they're white. He can't extend the same courtesy to the rest of the empire.
So I have to believe either that he's dumb or he's just being malicious. I mean, it could be both, but I mean, that's kind of how I see it.
I honestly it's just a racism, bro. Like, if he wasn't if he was able to sort of like make the same diagnosis without the white supremacist take, he would see the Hispanic world. He would see the Hispanista reason, so to speak. But since Spain is white, he can only see it in there. So yeah.
Yep. Let's continue.
Cool. Of Peruvians and Bolivians in their country, go look at the opinion polls. So this whole thing is ridiculous. It's not a civilizational identity to try and combine. Civilization is based on blood. It's not based on language or even religion. Because if it is, then Kenya is part of the British civilization. South Africa is part of the British and Dutch civilization.
It is.
The Philippines, which
hold on, real quick. There's a reason farm murders against whites in South Africa are a thing, but in Dominican Republic it's not. That's all I'm going to say here.
Yeah, of course. There's a reason why Haiti killed all its white people and the Dominican Republic didn't.
There's a reason Dominicans know how to farm, for instance.
Great points. These are great points. Let me continue.
These people that talk about civilizational identity, does that mean the Filipinos are Hispanic?
Fuck yes.
Yes.
I want to stop this. Yes, Striker. Yes, and the Hispanic movement, like the Hispanista movement, recognizes that. Everybody does that. I mean, everybody recognizes it. Like the Philippines is part of the Hispanic empire.
We did a whole episode on the Philippines, and it's a sad history. What happened after independence, and the Americans and the Japanese. Filipinos have faced a lot of trauma over the last century, but we went over a lot of the history prior to that, and I definitely feel Filipinos clearly, they're different from the way I look at a Colombian or a Peruvian or whatever, but there's a bridge, and I think again, the dialectical mind of the Anglosphere can't understand this, but there are such things as bridges towards people, right? There is, we don't have to be 100% alike to still be able to program together, to still sit at the same lunch table together.
The problem with the Philippines, go ahead. Sorry, I thought you.
No, that was it.
No, the problem with the Philippines is that it's too far away from us. They're too, like, if they were closer, if we could just take flights to, if it was something more like the Republic on the Dominican Republic with the rest of the continent, then there would be no doubt at all. Like the Philippines would be like another Puerto Rico. Unfortunately, they're very far away, and that sort of like connective tissue has weakened. But we do look towards
because of the Americans. Because of the Americans.
Because of the Americans, of course. The Philippines became an American colony, same as Puerto Rico. The difference is that Puerto Rico had all its brothers to sort of like keep it in check. If you understand what I mean, like they couldn't get away from the Hispanic influence. But the Philippines is all all the way over there in Asia. But yes, we do consider them part of the Hispanic civilizational identity. We look towards them. We want to get back together with them. We want them to relearn Spanish. They're Catholic. There are Catholic brothers,
and they're only not Muslim because of Spain. Just so everybody understands here.
Correct. And again, when we were at TRS, we did an English speaking. We did a Beyond the Episode wall where we talked about the Philippines, and we actually brought somebody from the Philippines to ask him questions instead of assuming a bunch of stuff or just reading for books. We asked him, and he told us like, the Spanish heritage, it's kind of like lost in the sense that people don't necessarily see themselves as part of like the Spanish, like the Hispanic community or anything like that because of the American influence. But he was like, but thank you for making us Catholic so that we're not Muslim. The guy told us that.
I want to touch on this real quick. Marcus has a comment. Civilizations based on blood tell the Roman Empire that.
Did Stryker already make that statement in the recording?
Yes, he did.
He did, and we have the write-up actually on it. Do you want to read it, Noel?
Yeah. One last point on the Philippines that I want to make is that we actually have a lot of listeners who are Filipino here in the U.S. Filipino pochos. It's pretty interesting, and we talk a lot with them. And, it's kind of like, understanding these things where it's like they've been Americanized to a certain extent, but it's like at the same time, they're also realizing like the negative consequences of that. And they're kind of at a existential moment where they're kind of analyzing their history very much like us, where we're kind of like, okay, 500 years have passed. Like, really, how did this thing happen? How did we get here? What was the genesis that brought us here to this point? The good and the bad. And how do we move forward? So it's kind of interesting that, the Filipinos are finding themselves asking themselves that. And I think as the future as the world keeps spinning, and sadly the West becomes, and I'm talking about Western Europe, the UN, those type of people, New York City, become less, and the Atlantic world becomes less relevant.
NATO.
Right. We start looking towards Asia. Again, right? I mean, we had the galleon trade for 250 years, right? Mexican silver was China's coin. So it's like we're coming back to this point where we're starting to look towards Asia. And, you know, the Philippines is our natural gateway there. That's and correct. Vice versa. So, you know, who knows what the future has in store as far as that dynamic.
Real quickly, what's actually interesting as well is and this guy who wrote this actually talked about us in private with this in an interesting way, in that like Spain was also heavily considering trying to absorb China into the Spanish Empire as well. It was something they heavily contemplated. You can actually read a lot of firsthand accounts of like Spanish explorers at the time, like saying like, you know, I've assessed like these Chinese women and they are like perfect for mestizaje. Like you can actually read stuff like that. And I'm like, you know what? They're not wrong. They're not wrong.
Where are the Chinese women at?
Yeah, it's true.
Mine waifus.
These reports from the 1600s of Spanish spies in Asia, basically like assessing how apt for mestizaje these women were.
Yeah, I think
that I've done the research, guys, and like they're perfect.
Yeah, I think that that was the time where there were problems with the Orthodox also tried to enter into China, just as an aside. But I think that the problem with bringing the Chinese into the Catholic Universal Empire is that they were asking the Vatican if they could, instead of using, you know, the traditional robes of our priests, they could use the traditional robes that they used in China for their monks, and the Vatican declined, and there were other issues. So that was one of the problems that basically, you know, sent that into failure. So.
Wow, that's interesting. I didn't know that.
Yeah, but the Orthodox also tried their luck for a very long time to enter into China and into Central Asia and all of that. It is interesting too, because there are some people that say that the Orthodox never tried to evangelize outside of you know, Europe and all of that. Just look into Alaska. The native language of the Inuits is written in Cyrillic. In Russian Cyrillic.
That's very true. Yeah, no, there's tons of, I think Aleut is another Indian nation of Alaska, and there's Orthodox saints. I
believe America purchased Alaska from Russia at one point, if I'm not mistaken.
Yeah, that's true. Yeah, exactly. Even in California, the most southern settlement that the Russians put is called Fort Ross, and you find an old wooden Orthodox church. So yeah, no, I mean
the Russians were all the way down into California. Yeah, that's why true, the Spanish and the Russians had a war, I think, in the 17th century.
Yeah, there was kind of an arms race because the Spanish wanted to keep control of the Pacific, of course. There was actually, just a quick side note here, there was a moment where actually Russian nobles and new Spanish nobles were going to get married here in California.
God, if only.
And I think it was like the governor's daughter, who was a Novo Hispana, Mexican girl basically, and she was gonna marry he was like a duke or something, who was like the ex-governor of Alaska. And because it was an Orthodox Catholic marriage, he had to go back to Russia to ask for permission, and he died on the way.
Unfortunately.
That's such an interesting chapter of history where somehow the Russian Empire and the Spanish Empire could have met, or they met here in the Americas. That's so interesting. I mean, it's kind of nuts, right?
And also the war that happened between the Spaniards and the Russians here in America was in very different terms compared to the Anglo and the French. Sure. It was basically, if you managed to convert the local native population, that was your territory, and it was both for the Spaniards and the Russian Orthodox. Yeah. That was one of the conditions of the war. How many people you managed to convert to your religion. It was not like this internecide, very brutal war that happened between like the Spaniards and the English and the French and the Dutch here in the continent.
Yeah. And Hernan Cortez also wasn't writing about how he was this Hyperborean Aryan, like, you know, conquering like, you know, Mexico for the sake of, like, you know, the white race. There's also that. People don't generally, amazing men don't operate like that. But Tercio, can you give us your thought real quickly? And then OG, the Rancho, can you read the part on civilization is based on blood after?
Yeah. Tercio, did you want to
Did I what?
You said you wanted to say something.
No, I was just thinking two things. Like, he asks, like, if, I don't know, like, is Nigeria part of the Anglo civilization or whatever? And I would say yes it is.
Yeah, absolutely.
To an extent, yes it is. I mean, they have to take responsibility. They have to take responsibility. The difference is precisely that they don't want to. They're like, oh, yuck, no, okay. So, like, yeah, we went there and we took some things, and now, you know, you're on your own or whatever. Like, we'll still send our corporations there to, you know, to extract whatever materials we need for our industry.
And we'll still sanction your countries if you try to, like, outlaw gay marriage too.
Exactly. But we don't want to have anything to do with you. We don't take. This is the typical liberal conceit of like, you know, the governors don't have any responsibility to the governed, and yeah, so he doesn't want to stand any bridges, he doesn't want to have any ties with those former territories of the British Empire. We do. I mean, not with the British Empire, but we do want to stay together. We do want to close closer ties among ourselves in the Hispanic world and with Spain. And there are people in Spain that want the same, and there are people that, you know, in the Philippines that want the same. So yes, just because we have a closer feeling or a closer relation of civilizational togetherness or civilizational belonging, and you don't, and the Anglo civilization basically, again, like, this comes back to the difference between a predatory empire and a generative empire. The British they were a predatory empire. They went there.
The parallels with Kraut are amazing. I would say that Kraut is more imperialist than this striker, but well,
no, he's more Napoleonic.
Yeah, and so, like, this nationalism for all peoples, it's basically a liberal conceit, right? It's a liberal idea, the same as liberté, you know, freedom, equality, and fraternity for all. It's something that you can say with your mouth, but at the end of the day, there's always imperial dialectics. There's always going to be an empire that's going to try to that will rule over different nations. And that's going to try to expand its territory and all that. So this all, like, I believe in nationalism for all peoples. That's basically saying, well, you know, you're on your own if an empire comes and screws you because you're different tiny nations, fighting, just tiny nations. You have no way of forming a coalition or anything like that. You are at the mercy of empire. So I don't know if he realizes that this nationalism for all peoples, this idea that, you know, you over there, I have nothing to do with you. It's liberalism. It's the same individuality, like the same individualism that liberalism applies to people, but applied to nations. And it's not real. Just like a society is a thing and you are not an island. Well, nations are not out there floating by themselves, you know, self-determination. There's always co-determination.
Huh.
Great. Yeah. Great. Yeah, can you read the thing?
Yeah, so let me respond to the civilization is based on blood quote that Stryker said here. This is a ridiculous position. This ridiculous position is often promoted by these types of individuals as an attempt to fetishize and deify the proteins that make the human genome. Empire, the highest form of civilizational expression, is inherently multi-ethnic and cosmopolitan. From the Hellenistic empires to the Roman successors, the great geopolitical entities of the Mediterranean basin encompass a large number of ethnicities. Without the presence of modern genetic racialism, people in these far-right circles often promote. After all, a Roman was an individual that held Roman citizenship, something that was given to many individuals not of Italic origin, and eventually to everyone residing within the empire's domain. The multi-ethnic imperial model, which manages to rally a population under the banner of a single unifying institution, be it the church, the legion, or the empire, will always be superior to the particularist nation-state model. The obvious proof of this is the dominant victory of the three multi-ethnic empires over the Axis powers during World War II. And despite that some people might wish to tell you, the genetically Italian and German troops of the U.S. Army showed very little solidarity for their supposed brethren on the other side.
Yes.
Nor did the multi-ethnic Soviet troops lack courage and patriotism in their total victory of the German army. The nation state is a liberal invention, an inferior and barbaric model that appeals to the narcissism of a population by asserting that the fact that they exist is somehow sufficient justification for political independence. Very deep point.
Oh my God, that was so
It's
awesome.
It's not done yet.
Oh my God, that was so good.
Last sentence here. Ethno-nationalism in the 20th and 21st centuries mainly exists as an Anglo-American foreign policy tool used to destabilize and sometimes even dissolve large organic imperial states that are perceived as competitors, from Spain to Russia to Iran and China. Interesting.
So it's like AIDS. It's like AIDS. They export AIDS, basically. Civilizational AIDS.
Civilizational AIDS. This ethno-national.
Sí, señor. Sí. Ven para acá. Vamos a quitártelo.
It's interesting though that the our writer here, contributor here, points out Russia, Iran, and China, and who are the rogue states of the world. Who is the Atlanticist powers afraid of coming together? Is it not Persia, Russia, and China? One of the three biggest civilizations on the Asian mainland.
That's right.
Yeah, that's
right.
That's very interesting brought up. This is ridiculous. The whole civilization is based on blood thing. I mean, the greatest emperors of Rome weren't Italic Romans. They were
Hispanic.
Yeah, and I mean, even the foundational myth of the city of Rome, the raping of the Sabine. There wasn't enough women, so they had to go race mix in order to found their city, because there wasn't enough women. So they had to take women from another ethnicity in order to be able to found. And did they look at their sons like these half-breed mutts? No, this is a masculine virile.
Mixed race people are confused.
They did not look at their sons like, they looked at their sons like Romans, regardless of what race their mother was.
Yep.
Wasn't Europa the original, like the mythological princess Phoenician?
Yes. Yes. Yeah, but
He's a Palestinian.
Yes. These people will actually argue, because they have a love-hate relationship with the Roman Empire, that when the Roman Empire opened up the extension of the citizenship to the rest of the other populations that were not Roman, that was the start of the decline of the empire. They will argue that, and with some, force.
Byzantium lived another 1,000 years. Like, that's the blind spot that we have with the fall of Rome is like whether they chalk it up to Christianity or like diversity or even socialism, whatever you want to call it. They always forget that Constantinople lasted another 1,000 years.
Well, not only. Oh, sorry, keep going.
No, and that everybody in the West wants to be Roman. Everybody wants to be Roman. Everybody wants to be the next Rome, the third Rome, the fourth Rome. Even we claim, that we're the inheritors.
The American Rome, the Spanish Rome.
I was going to also say what's interesting is people that kind of make this sort of. People that make the argument that like Rome fell due to like race mixing, this is usually from a more American Nordicist perspective, in which this person is kind of saying this, in which what I always found kind of puzzling with that is that I could be wrong. Anyone here can correct me if I'm wrong, but I think the plurality or even straight up majority of slaves in which Romans mixed with usually came from like Central Europe. You know what I mean? Like these were actually more like, I guess, white looking Europeans, more people who Nordicists would classify as being more genetically like pure European. Not that I'm saying that they are, that this theory deserves to be treated with any sort of respect because it's dumb, because it is dumb. But my point is like that doesn't even add up even according to their own logic. So Rome got worse because it mixed with more blonde people is like, what?
Yeah, nationalism is liberalism. It's a liberal invention. It drips of liberals. It drips of the aids of liberalism. And
it led to millions of people getting slaughtered in World War I for like really asinine and just stupid reasons that like didn't even make sense. On top of that.
Right. There's always like a national, like a historical delirium. You know, it always comes with historical delusions, like with Aryanism, like we was Aryans, we was Kangs, all, you know, German people are all the same people, which, you know, whatever, could be true.
The SS didn't even believe that, but that's a different story.
It's whatever. Liberalism is not like, I'm sorry, nationalism is liberalism. It's all you got to understand.
Absolutely. Let's continue this clip since we read that.
I kind of wish I hadn't been like paying attention to the donations and I had listened to all that, because I guess because Louis Condi, who I know pretty well, is saying Strecker is equating Criollo with Hispanic, which is not 1-to-1. So
well, I guess this is just a disagreement based on how people sense or see a civilization. If you believe a civilization is based in blood and you know that the ties of blood, then you have a very different opinion than someone who believes that civilization is based on linguistic categories or a shared religion. You know, Filipinos are very strongly influenced by the Spanish language. They have Spanish names. They were under the Spanish.
Can you stop it for a second? Sure. No. Nations are based on G's, of which we didn't know about until the 20th century. So that's what everybody based their nationalities on, and their sense of belonging on genetic tests that we only had access to in the 20th century. Not religion, not language, you know, and they come from nowhere, right? Like language and religion, they're a thing, right? Like you go to the mall and you buy a language pack, and you go to the mall and you buy your religion pack.
Well, Americans are basically buying like into Orthodox Christianity, but that's a different thing altogether.
Exactly. This is the gringo outlook. This is the gringo Weltanschauung. These things are just commodities. What's not a commodity? What can you buy? Well, jeans, I guess. Like, you know, you can't really buy your jeans. So I guess all sense of identity comes from genetics. All these other stuff is just fake. There's no historical development of it. It doesn't mean anything. It doesn't mean anything to speak Spanish. It doesn't mean anything to, you know, my nationalism, but he can just, you know, sweep under the rug all the things that nations actually built and provide and are you know, constructed upon in favor of this genetic, nerd genetic stuff analysis. It's completely outrageous. It's completely stupid.
It totally is. Any other comments?
Let's just keep going.
Okay.
Why aren't they part of the Hispanic civilization then? Filipinos are very strongly influenced by the Spanish language. They have Spanish names. They were under the Spanish crown for many years. They're Catholic. Why aren't they part of the Hispanic civilization then? If that's, that's my critique of that. I'm going to...
This nigga needs to go all the way to the Philippines. He needs to sail across the Pacific to try to undo the Hispanic identity.
He needs to marry a woman there and like just stop with this dumbassery.
I bet you if he sees a fine Filipino girl, he'll be Hispanic real quick.
He'll be like, "Sí, mami, ¿cómo estás?"
Assert that this whole thing is actually the American invention. I mean, North America, United States American. It's a fake category created by influenced by Saul Alinsky, created in the 1970s.
Oh my God! Oh my God!
Cubans, Black Puerto Rican.
Source. I would need a source for that.
Saul Alinsky created Hispanismo.
This is a part that really pissed me off because it just shows his ignorance. It shows that this guy is just not familiar at all with anything. No tradition, intellectual tradition of our world. And again, going back to Vasconcelos being influenced by Jose Enrique Rodo, who's an Uruguayan, it just shows this guy's just, and this is, early 1900s. It just shows how ignorant this guy is. One of the viewers shared with me Osvaldo Lira, who's a Chilean priest, who wrote in the 40s and 50s. And he wrote a book called Hispanismo y el Mestizaje. I mean, where the fuck is this guy getting these notions? Saul Alinsky made up Hispanic?
Bro, Ramiro de Maeztu, okay, the guy that wrote the book on Hispanismo, the one that propelled it. He basically sort of like gave it a name, Hispanismo, that we use now, born in the 19th century, 1874. What the fuck is this guy talking about? Saul Alinsky. Again, Anglocentrism. It's like the gringos do everything, They're behind everything.
And Maestro was Spanish. He was from Spain.
He was Spanish, correct?
He's probably Jewish.
He was actually part Anglo.
Well, a distinction without difference.
Okay, he was the son of Manuel de Maeztu Rodriguez, a Cuban engineer and landowner from Cienfuegos with ancestry from Navarre, while his mother, Juana Whitney, so his mother's name was Whitney, was born in Nice, the daughter of a British diplomat. So his mom was Anglo-French.
So I guess great. He may be right then. It's an Anglo invention then.
Oh yeah.
Wow.
He ended up being right.
What about people like Rubén Darío, who wrote in the late 1800s, early 1900s?
Forget about that. The Catholic kings refer to America, their possessions in America, as the Spains.
The Spains, exactly.
The Spains. So this notion that a shared identity or a shared root or a shared civilizational root, it comes from like Saul
Tercio, what the Anglos, the British Empire called the 13 colonies? Do you know?
Colonies.
No,
maybe
the plantations.
The plantations. You're right. Yeah, the plantations.
Wow.
Yep.
I want to bring up another chunk of notes that we actually skipped over here regarding this same subject that you guys are talking about, conflating, because he talked about their colonial masters, conflating Anglo-colonialism with Spanish imperialism. A very common theme among Anglophone discourse is the projection of Anglo-French colonial model onto the endeavors of the Spanish crown of the Americas. A typical expression of said phenomenon is the misconception that Spain had colonies in America. Spanish America was a series of viceroyalties, general capitancies, and in some cases, territory directly administered by the Crown of Castile. Therefore, the overseas territories, which is what they were called, of the crown, held the same legal status as their European possessions in the peninsula and beyond. For example, there was the viceroyalty of Naples, right? That was another viceroyalty of the Spanish Empire. Mexico City wasn't a Spanish colonial possession. It was a Spanish city. The wars that led to American independence weren't wars of ethnic liberation, but wars of secession, fought between groups of individuals of very similar ethnic and cultural backgrounds. The contrast becomes obvious when we consider the dealings of the English with the Boers and the Malaysians, or those of the French with the Haitians, the Vietnamese with the Algerians, hostilities that revolved around the pursuit of ethnic and religious liberation from an alien intruder. I think that's good enough for here. Well, just one last note.
Well, there's more to this. There's a few more paragraphs.
Falsely labeled as an extractive colonial model, Spanish authorities operated within a generative imperial doctrine, which we touched on earlier, with the intention of establishing a permanent and autosufficient extension, recreation of the society already present in Castile. But this time on American soil. This did not occur in most French and British colonial possessions. Regarding the examples of Kenya and Black America, it's blatantly obvious that what happened in Kenya is different from the cases of Spanish America. The average Kenyan is not a mixture of indigenous and British, nor are there any significant multi-generational populations of ethnically British people in that country that solely identify with that said country. In the case of Black America, the connection and continuity it has with white America is immediately obvious to any outside observer. The two clearly are part of the same civilization. And for this reason, I've personally always referred to them as Black gringos, which we touched on earlier. In conclusion, these two imperial models are profoundly different, and conflating these two because Spanish people tend to be of somewhat similar skin tone to the French or English is idiocy.
Yep.
So yeah, it's important to understand the imperial system of Spain. This deserves an episode unto itself. But Spain didn't really exist. It was the Castile, Leon, Aragon, right?
You're wrong there. No, Spain did exist. Like,
well, I mean,
if it's Spain, this is a problem. This is a problem.
I think he means Spain is like a modern nation state, the way most people think of it now.
Okay. If that's what you mean, yeah. When we say Spain, not the current Spain. The current Spain is as much a product of the independence process as Peru or Venezuela are.
Yeah.
Yeah. What I meant was that you had the crown of Castile, right? You had the crown of Aragon, and when these two came together is when we had the birth of, Spain as we know it.
Yeah.
But understanding that system from the peninsula is extended across into the Americas. It was the exact same system. It's not like the possessions in the Americas were of second rank or something. It was the same legal system of these different crowns and kingdoms and viceroyalties and grand and general capacities that was extended here, which you see the evidence of that. Go to Peru, you'll see these cities and towns were built. Where's the evidence of the Anglo Empire in India? The railroads.
Yep. I made a video in Spanish called the British Empire was a piece of shit. El Imperio Británico fue una porquería, where I basically go to like the CIA World Fact Book and go to like the top 5 most important former colonies of the British Empire, or even the ones that have the most population today, and I show that there's very little remains of Britain there. Like, they didn't mix, so there's no genetic remnants of British influence. They don't speak English. This is something that most people, I think, would be shocked to learn. Like, even in India, people don't learn, like, they learn English like we learn English in Mexico, or like, somebody from Norway would learn English as something, you learn it at a school so you can do business, so you can get a job. People in India speak their, whatever their tongues are in their territories. They don't speak English at home, and they're not Christian. They were not Christianized. So it's what I was saying. It's like, suppose there were some aliens that didn't know anything about our history, and they were looking at Colombia, and they would look at Spain. They would go like, well, they have the same religion, same architecture. They seem to speak the same language with some differences or whatever. They're clearly related. I don't think someone, an alien race would look at Bangladesh or Hong Kong and look at Britain and say like, oh yeah, I can see where Bangladesh comes from.
No, it's the systems that they live there, that the British live there. The banking system and all of that, and their sacrosanct, British common law and all of that. because they're still following that. That's what they will argue, but you're looking at the system that has basically imposed itself in all of the war. So,
Yeah.
And to the extent that these remnants remain on these former British colonies, like these are just horrible ones that have been nothing but a detriment to these nations.
Yes.
Yeah, let's continue the clip.
Go ahead.
It's almost done.
Sure. Okay, and you're seeing some of that coalition and identity breaking up now, where you see people starting to say, like, wait, all these Cubans voted for Trump, all these Black Puerto Ricans voted for Biden, so you can't really make any political sense of that because it's not a real group. So that's my view of that.
all whites voted for Trump.
Bro,
Most Hispanics don't vote in general, just so everybody here understands. Hispanics are very apolitical relative to black and white gringos in the United States in terms of voting demographic patterns.
Hispanics just vote for their local political machines. It has nothing to do with political ideology. Hispanics are traditional by default.
Blacks and whites do this too, as well.
No,
it's just,
don't you guys know? Go.
Go ahead, Tercio.
No, I was just saying that. Didn't you guys know that the only way to define, like the best way to define a group is if they vote Republican
Biden or Trump? Yeah.
Yeah, that's the way. That's the way you define in group or out group. Jesus Christ.
My God, this guy really is fucking dumb, dog.
This guy thinks Tucker Carlson is like one of the best things that has ever happened in like American history.
I hate to be a fucking dick, you guys, but the fact that guys like this have the audience they have just shows the desperate situation that deracinated generic European Americans are in.
I mean, this guy is literally making six figures off of paywall money. I just want to make that clear for everybody listening. He makes six figures making these really dumb takes on his podcasts.
Well,
and this is the quality of the leadership. It has to say something about the quality of the character of those that they lead. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah. Well, if he's making six figures, it's gonna make it very hard. But I'm, to make this appeal. But I'm still gonna make it. Striker, stop being a pygmy. Come join us. Embrace your Hispanic roots. Learn about your own people through your own people. You talk about nationalism and stuff, but you're talking about Hispanics through a gringo lens. Stop it. Stop it. Learn your own history, talk to your own people, learn about where you come from, and stop being a dumb gringo, become a Hispano. It's going to be, it's going to fall on deaf ears. If he's making six figures, that's, he has every incentive to keep being retarded, but the invitation is there. We'll welcome you. We are the pygmy rehabilitation factory.
Yeah, I mean, we definitely are.
But the problem, Tercio, is that Striker's lips are too tight. It's just not very Hispanic, and I think that's why. I hate to be an asshole, but honestly, I think a lot of these issues, and I see this on the black side of the scale too, is that people have these little hangups about themselves, and it traps them into positions. And I honestly believe Striker might get pissed off or offended by this, but I honestly believe that if he had like not such puckered in lips, fuller lips, he would probably identify as Hispanic. But the fact that his lips are the way they are, you look at him and you don't think he's Hispanic, because Hispanics usually have fuller lips. I'm sorry. This might be a little stupid, but I do believe there's something there. There's always something there. Anyways, I'll keep going.
Because I'm just spark another sketch. I'm going to Zero Schizo's other donation of $3. Okay. On the topic of Brazil, Borzoi should invite the leader of NR Brazil, Rafael Machado. He is on Twitter, and he can explain why what you're not saying is true regarding Southern Brazil.
Okay, well, he can disagree. I know people in Southern Brazil that agree with my perspective on this, so he can disagree if he wants, and more power to him. But yes, that's my opinion on this.
Third position is having differences of opinion.
Yeah, well, that's pretty much it. So I mean, I know there's a couple seconds left. Actually, hold on.
That's unheard of.
Oh yeah.
Reminds me of the Fascist Internationale there in 1934.
That's actually a good example there. This is the last donation, unless somebody squeaks one in at the end. Tactical Boomerism donates $14 simply to say N. So
that's pretty much it. I guess the last point here about Brazil and people having different opinions, you can go to any country in Spanish America and you're going to find people who disagree with this. That doesn't mean that the general population, the folk, the people, the masses, the nation, the ethnos doesn't operate this way or doesn't think this way. They don't have to. It's like a fish doesn't know he's in water until you take him out. And most people, when you have an ethnicity that's alive, it's not something people are conscious about. They don't have to think about it. They just it's the operating system. You don't have to sit there and analyze it. You only start to analyze it when.
No, I disagree. I analyze it every day that you use Windows. It's horrible. No, I'm just joking. Go ahead.
I mean the ethnic operating system, but. Yeah, so you're always going to find people. You're going to find not Nazis in Peru who look overwhelmingly indigenous. Throwing up the Sig Heil.
You could that they're the butt of every joke. The more Nazis.
Well, hold on real quickly. There is this guy in Peru that was like leading this Nazi party there. I forget his name, but it's not important. But what's funny is that he's actually on record saying that the conquistadors, including I believe Pizarro, who I think was a goat herder, was an actual Jew, and that these were all just Jews oppressing Indians. It becomes a very cartoonish, just imitation of an already cartoonish ideology that was destroyed in Germany. And it's just why do you want to be that? Why do you look at this thing and just want to emulate it when it's it didn't even work for these people who was actually, that's who they meant it to be for, and it didn't even work there.
Because they had cool uniforms and they had cool slogans, I guess. Nationalism for all people. But then that requires, if you're Hispanic, you have to disavow your entire history and your entire people and think everything is a mistake. Everything they did was a mistake, and that you should pledge yourself to the imperial model of your civilizational enemies, namely France and England. This is nationalism. This is what nationalism has for Hispanics, just renouncement of your own history, denouncement of your own history, and having to embrace the history of foreign people. This is, you can clearly tell that nationalism was almost built against Spain, against the Hispanic or the Hispanic world, against the world that Spain built. Almost tailored to a T.
Yeah, I would not. It is a real problem here in Latin America. This kind of what Tercio is saying, because we are seeing with the kind of fundamental democratism and liberalism that is spreading to all of Latin America. That's a real problem. The rejection of everything in the past, especially after the independence. You can see it in our schools that with the whole colonial period, in quotes, it's pretty much brushed over, especially here in Mexico. I was a product of that system. So I'm not going to argue with Stryker and those kind of people that there's a growing looking up towards the things that the United States is promoting in all over our continent. You just have to look at to our elites. They go to the United States mainly to get their education, and that's how all of these things spread to our country. So, we're trying to not recreate, but we're trying to rekindle the Hispanic heritage. Regenerate. Because it is currently being lost to a lot of people. It's not the indigenous movements. It's the kind of
it's being lost even in Spain. I mean, Spain is probably
the most lost, probably.
Yeah, exactly. You know, like you find more of kind of this old Spain in like a little pueblo in Jalimich than you will probably in most places in Spain. And that's a sad reality. But Spain itself has become very anglicized and Franco-sized, French-sized. I don't want to say Franco,
even people that you know are in the school of Oviedo with Gustavo Bueno, they're going to say that the Spain is probably the most pro European Union country in the entire Europe.
Wow,
yeah.
That's sad.
Yeah, Spain is a very good vassal for the global home empire.
It is, and you know, I talk to people from Spain a lot as well, and it's a sad conversation that we usually have because the realities of their country just go against itself. I mean,
it's like here in America, we want to be white, we want to be gringos, pygmies, and then
or black,
or black. Gringo.
Another variation of gringo. Yeah,
gringo. In Spain, they want to be European. They want to be Germans. They want to be French. They want to be French so bad. Like the Spain has, we all have an inferiority complex. I lived it. I mean, you know something? I want to ask Stryker this. Did any of the things you say or thought or think right now about Latin America came from our show? From things that I said, because in the past I said many of the things that he is repeating now. So, you know, I'm not saying that, you know, he necessarily got it from me, but I am guilty of spreading some things like what he is saying. So I don't know if he actually, you know, he could have gotten from me. He could have gotten, you know, on his own through some of the means, but I am guilty of this as much as anybody. So that's why, I want to extend the invitation. Stop being a pygmy. Stop trying to be white. Assume your Hispanic identity. Assume the history of your own people.
Well, you know, I understand. I don't know this guy. I wish I could have a conversation with him. We made efforts to have a conversation with him that he's
been reached out to. There's no way he didn't see any proposals that were made.
Ignored. You know, I can be aggressive as fuck, but that's not my default. You know, I can have a civil conversation with someone who has completely different views from me. You can even go on my channel and see me talk to fucking Dingo. And be patient with him for 40 minutes, literally just trying to have a conversation. You know, so, but what I don't like, my impression is, again, I can only go based on my impression because I haven't been able to have a conversation, is he seems like a Hispanic who grew up whitewashed in New York City, which can be a very lonely place. And there's just no space for kind of this phenomenon that we were talking about, like kind of a Hispanic enclave like Texas and Florida and California are. So, you know, he was kind of cornered into just identifying as a generic deracinated European American. But my impression is I get the impression he doesn't speak Spanish very well. You know, which is, you know, something that does make a big difference. I get the impression he really doesn't have many Hispanic friends from different parts of Hispanic America. He hasn't really traveled through Hispanic America, though somebody claimed he did. Because
I mean, he's claimed he did, but I would say the only Hispanics he interacts with are probably the self-hating mestizos at the pool parties in New York City that he's at.
Yeah, because I find it impossible. You know, I've had the fortune to be able to travel quite extensively throughout Spanish America. And, you know, it's just, there's no way you can have the views you have if you've actually traveled through these places, if you actually made friends with these people, if you've seen the different regions of the countries. It's just impossible. It's impossible.
My guess is he mostly went to tourist areas and assumed like, oh, like I'm being treated well because I am white. Like he probably had some sort of thing like that.
I don't know. I don't know,
because let me tell you what, I grew up in Venezuela all my life. And when I moved to the United States, I was in rural Illinois, surrounded mostly by white people or by black gringos, and it became very easy. To start disdaining or disliking Hispanics and all that. I was also very pro American. I was very, very pro gringo, Anglophile at that point. But it I had that mentality basically, not having like the regular contact of, realizing that, not everybody that's brown is a proletarian. It makes it easy to sort of like forget and to just like, think like, we're completely separate people. We're completely different. We have nothing to do with each other, blah, blah, blah. It was when I moved. Well, I mean, I started to get out of it even up there, but it wasn't until I moved back here, to Spanish America, that you actually interact with Hispanics of all stripes, not just proletarians, right? Of all stripes, all colors, all classes, that you realize like, oh yeah, no, these people are just like me, I'll
say this. I recently moved to a majority Hispanic town because I used to grow up essentially in a very white spot. And I think that has also played a big role for myself as well, that I kind of like came to realize like how people actually are and not just getting my ideas of like other people from like internet memes. And I think it's something that's really important. And I want to say this real quickly as well, just for, because we know Eric Stryker is going to be listening to this. I just want to remind everyone, Eric Stryker, he's debated people like Destiny. He's debated Vosh. He's debated like straight up Antifa members who have doxed him and his own comrades straight up. He'll engage with these people. However, he won't engage or debate us because he knows deep down it would lead to his little fiefdom's undoing. Like he needs all of these essentially deracinated whites, these deracinated mestizos that are, in the TRS paywall to keep giving money so he can keep living this lavish lifestyle that he does. So we can do these, Stryker come back to Hispanicity sort of thing to him. But I mean, I think all of the incentives are there for just him not to really be interested in to keep doing his, racist conservatism that he's now pushing, which, he was more Nazbol a few years ago, but now it's just really lowbrow racist conservative tier stuff. But that's what sells, if you want to be filling up the paywall shekels, that's how you do it.
The hustle.
Exactly. And that's the one authentically Hispanic thing about him, is that like he is a good hustler. I'll give him that.
Yeah, man. It's very Al Sharpton-ish with a lot of these guys I've noticed.
Oh yeah.
And I definitely want to avoid anything like that, man. I don't know how I ended up in this situation. I got COVID, man. That's what the COVID year does. But yeah, no, it's these guys are trapped by their hustles, and that's a shitty situation to be in. It's very compromising. I don't know if you guys had any final points you want to make. I wanted to close out the show with this video in Cuba between a white Argentine and a black Cuban woman. It's a very nice video. But yeah, if you guys have any last points, please.
I just want to share our podcast, our live stream, Soda Hysteria, and our YouTube channel, Mundo Republiqueto. You can find us also on Twitter, El Republiqueto, on Facebook, and our website, mundorepubliqueto.com. OG, you can leave the references on the description, the video description. Tomorrow, actually, on 8 p.m. 8 p.m. Central, we're gonna be discussing the situation in Colombia with an actual Colombian. It's gonna be in Spanish. We do Spanish content. The English content, we do it on OG's channel, but we mainly produce it's Spanish articles, Spanish videos and podcasts and all of that. And we actually fight a lot of this, like, racialist, Nazi, whatever perspective, because we live there. We lived it. So we know what they think. We know what
we
the
were
arguments
in
are.
deep. Very deep. And these people know it. And Eric Stryker is going to know when he hears us.
Yeah, and so like we criticize them, but from the right. They're used to getting criticisms from the left, which is why, again, like I think, like Guillermo said, like he will engage with Antifa and everything like that because he knows how to respond to Antifa, but well, not he personally, but they usually have a very hard time responding to arguments made from sort of like their same corner, but with a different world outlook.
Yeah, that's kind of what Memo was talking about here.
Afro-Saxons and Anglo-Saxons.
Good one, right? It's a good one.
I like it. We'll take it. Afro-Saxons.
Two peas in a pod.
Black gringos, Afro-Saxons, same thing. I would highly recommend Mundo Republiqueto. Is just the quality. I wish the Pocho Hour had that quality.
One day.
One day we'll boost the show up there. But no, it's just so much information, so much education, so much quality work. The quality of the guests, just really, really great show. And if you're kind of choppy in your Spanish, it's a great opportunity to start practicing your Spanish to regain the language a bit. And try. You got Venezuelans, you got Venezuelan Peruvians, you got Mexicans, you got Argentines, you got all kinds of people coming through there. And so you get to listen to the different accents, the different vocabulary. Very, very cool show. I definitely recommend it.
Bolivians, we actually have people from Bolivia reporting from Bolivia when what's happening, all that shit with Evo Morales.
Yeah, I remember that. That's great stuff. And I'm gonna hop on the show too, even though I'm not Colombian. I'm married to a Colombian, so I'm Colombian by extension. And I know
I might even hop on too.
Yeah, you're welcome. I'm going to pass the link to OG, and maybe he can pass it to you when we have that discussion.
Yeah. And of course, Guillermo also has a really great channel. He's been reading a lot of lengthy books and translating them or providing audiobook versions of them. You should definitely check him out, and on Telegram as well. So I'll definitely put the link on there.
Yeah, Rancho, real quick, can you let everyone know what it is we're planning to do on Friday? We got a little book review treat for everybody.
That's right. So on Friday, we're going to be recording an episode. Why don't you tell us a little bit more about it, since you're the one who kind of brought it to my table?
Sure. So I've actually been, and this is why I might not be able to make it tomorrow for the Colombia episode, because I got to just keep making sure I have all the right notes and that I'm ready for everything. But we're going to be doing a book review on, this is going to cause a lot of butthurt among a lot of people in this, who see it, especially American oriented ones, people that glorify it. It's called White Trash, The 400-Year Untold History of Class in America. And it essentially talks about how the extremely poor European immigrants who came to America over the course of several centuries, how they were actually viewed by the American elites, and how this idea of like pan-white solidarity was nothing more than a cynical ploy for, the people at the very top of this Anglo Judeo-Masonic society that dominated over North America. And it's going to lead to a lot of people getting super upset, especially if they're like Southern nationals, especially if they're American nationals, because it shows that, this America was a shopping mall from day one that really did not value the unique ethnicities that were coming to this country to form a better life.
Nice. Yeah. And and we'll have Marcus Cicero as a guest as well.
Yes. So Marcus Cicero, who was a very high-ranking member of the League of the South for, I think, about a decade, and who is currently out of this stuff and just wants to publicly distance himself from all of this garbage as much as he can. He has done the bulk of the note-taking, and he knows just a lot conventionally about this sort of history in general. And he's going to be able to go into just a lot of stuff that a lot of people have always wanted to delve into, but no one has really done it so far. So I think you guys will really find it informative.
Yeah, and I'm looking forward to having a conversation with Marcus and kind of interviewing him a little bit, because I think he has an interesting perspective, as to kind of America and growing up in it and what it does to a nigga.
Yeah. Can I say something before we go?
Yeah.
Yeah, I just have one message for Striker. Maybe he will like it.
Yeah.
Ay, es puto este cabrón.
Yeah, that was it.
No se escuchó bien. ¿Qué dijo?
Ay, es puto este cabrón.
No se escucha algo. Ay, ¿qué este cabrón?
No, the moment has passed. It's a dramatic happen.
Let's put it behind us.
Yeah.
Okay, let me play this song. Let me know if you guys can hear it well. Apparently, this is actually a Spanish woman. I thought she was Argentinian because her stage name is Argentina or something like that. But I think she's actually from Spain. So I want to make sure that the audio is good. Is the audio good? Or is it a little bit too loud?
No, it's okay.
Fine.
It's a little loud, but yeah, I think it's good.
Se me agota ya la paciencia porque esperando. Se me agota ya la paciencia porque esperando. Y a veces yo te levanto a rayar el día. Y que el idilio perdure siempre al llegar la noche. Y cuando
I'm really sorry. My fucking computer's a piece of shit, or my internet connection.
Y a veces yo te levanto a rayar el día. Y así no se fundan en una sola palma y la mía. Qué bonito, qué bonito, qué bonito. Soñando contigo, a veces me doy a un rincón y me quedo en el vacío, sufriendo por ti, amor mío, te llama mi corazón. Soñando, qué bonito. Ay, qué manera de quererte, qué manera de soñar contigo, soñando, 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 hasta que salga el brillo. Ay, oye, daría mil años si fuera tu bendición, pero el tiempo va volando, ven y calma mi pasión. Soñando, vamos contigo, ay, pero qué linda más bella, como viene gente hermosa, soñando contigo España, muchacho, qué cosa, qué cosa, qué cosa. Soñando, ay, contigo. Soñando siempre contigo. Lucía, 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 ando siempre contigo. Siempre contigo. Ay, soñando, digo, siempre contigo. Soñando, digo, siempre contigo.
Well, I hope you guys enjoyed that song, and I hope you enjoyed the episode. I think there you see a little bit of kind of what we've been putting forth. You see a Spanish woman, you see these mixture of Spanish and indigenous men, you see a black woman, and the fruits of this mixture is exactly what we're talking about. The past hasn't been perfect. It hasn't been a walk in the park, but there has been beautiful moments, and even the difficult moments have led to where we are today. And I think we should be grateful for both. This is the flowering of our culture. I think Hispanics who watch this, regardless of what part of Hispanic America you are, you should be grateful to God that we still have folklore, that our cultural roots, no matter the intensity of the culture war that we're facing, are still very much alive, that this music is still produced, that this flourishing of culture, this musical baroqueness is baroque, not broke, still exists, is still productive, still green, still creates fruit. And I hope you enjoyed it. I don't know if you guys have any final notes as we sign off, but I'm ready to end it here.
One more shilling. You gotta shill fast. No, just saying that we actually have a historian on board on Mundo Republiqueto that writes about cultural stuff, like music, flamenco and stuff like that, and he talks a lot about the cultural cross-pollination between America and Spain. Most people think that it's like only Spain influenced America, but it turns out that America also influenced, Spanish America. That's what I mean, not the United States. Sure. Influenced Spain. So it wasn't this colonial stuff. It was cross-pollination. It was treatment among equals, basically.
Yeah, that's true. Yeah, and what's his name again? I know I've been trying to get him on the show.
Antonio Moreno.
Excellent. And his YouTube channel is also excellent. Very, very good.
Look him up.
Watch his YouTube channel.
It's all in Spanish, but he just shares. He's a historian. He's a trained historian, and he shares a lot of very interesting history that really debunks a lot of the Black legend bullshit, and it allows us to kind of reevaluate really our history. And again, the whole hope here, the whole intention here is for us. There are things to heal from, and there are things to face about the past, but we need to go ahead and do that so we can kind of move forward in a strong position with our shoulders back and our chest up, and face the world, because the world has never stopped spinning. Teddy with his big stick walking around our region, he's an old man now who can hardly lift the stick up anymore, and we're not the little Indian kids running around barefoot anymore. We're in our 20s, we're in our 30s, we're at family starting age. And so you really, again, the opportunity is here for us. And that's really what El Momento Hispano is about. Helping you guys have the right kind of mentality and spiritual outlook to be fruitful and productive, and grab life by the horns and take advantage of the opportunity that the Lord is bestowing us today.
Yeah, absolutely.
Amen.
There's one final thing I want to say here for any of you guys listening. Maybe you're struggling learning Spanish, or it's not as good as you want it to be and you want to improve on it. I just want to say, working on these sorts of things, it's almost like being a captain of a very large but slow moving ship. Like, you're not going to be able to do all of this in a day or in a week or in a month. This is something you're going to have to constantly be moving, something you're constantly be striving and moving towards. And you have to put in the effort and be constantly doing this all the time. Like, you should ideally change all the settings on your phone if you're on it a lot, like, all in Spanish. You should be, talking, reading, watching stuff. If you're going to watch TV, try to watch things in Spanish as much as possible. Classroom stuff is not how you learn this sort of things. Like, you don't learn this in a stale classroom. It is trying to completely immerse yourself whenever you can. And, if you have family members that speak Spanish, try to spend more time with them. Try to actually, get to know about the folklore that's specifically from your family, you know, all about your family history. Talk to them in Spanish as much as you can. These people, especially the older ones in your family, they're not going to be around forever, and you really need to cherish them. And, you know, that's going to be a lot more important at the end of the day than, you know, getting into super weird online like arguments with people about things that really don't matter. That's kind of my final thoughts.
Great. Well, thank you. Thank you guys for coming on the show. Thank you, audience, for participating and listening. It's good to be back. It's been a while. I'm glad to be healing up and to get back to work here and start producing some content for you guys. God bless you, and bon voyage. Peace.
Ciao, ciao.
Adios.